Dude, you picked one of like the coolest jobs of all time to be your career.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like very grateful. And I definitely didn't do it on my own. I think like it's one of those things you kind of have to put yourself out there. And I knew early on, this is what I wanted to do when I was actually, I take that back. When I played college football at a community college.
Okay.
And we were super talented. We were co-national champions in, was that 2013? And I redshirted that year.
Okay.
Then came back for a second year and kind of was like, I could maybe come back for a third and there's a chance I could play, but then more than likely it's like, I know my like physical capabilities.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Like, I'm probably going to go to like, I don't know, Southern Missouri Tech State and
Right.
play football for 2 more years and then graduate and be like, all right, like now what?
Right.
Or I can apply to schools, kind of see where I get in, go there, and then kind of just figure it out from there.
When you went to JUCO originally, was it to try to play sports somewhere else, or was it just like a kind of a stepping stone sort of thing to figure out what you wanted to do later?
No, it definitely was me trying to play somewhere else.
Yeah.
In high school, like I don't want to say I got screwed because I don't want to imply that it was like, oh, poor me. But my junior year, I knew I was good enough to play, but we had a ton of seniors that were really talented. And so I kind of just like, it was my first time ever playing sports that like, I didn't play.
Really?
And it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like,
Especially knowing that you could start at a different school too.
yeah, it was just like, I remember just being like, another game, not playing. Like I just standing on the sidelines. This is like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And then like stuck it out. Kind of long story short, the guy that had played, he was the same grade as me. He got moved up to varsity as a sophomore. And so he was super talented. He was getting scouted by a lot of people. He was a very close friend of mine. Actually, we played for a long time prior. And he had a history of injuries. And so the first game of the year, I don't remember what he did. He had knee issues.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up getting hurt about halftime. And then I came in, played really well, and then basically just like didn't give up the starting job the whole year.
Okay.
And like, set a few records, had like a really, really good senior year. And then luckily we had a community college like 20 minutes from my hometown. And they have a history of being very good. They've won a national championship in 2008. That's where Aaron Rodgers played.
Where was this at?
Butte College.
Okay.
So Aaron Rodgers played there. His brother Jordan played there. There was a ton of like just really talented guys that were there. So I didn't really get recruited at all. It was like I didn't go to any camps. I'm from a small town. I was 6 foot, 180 pounds maybe. And so that just like made logical sense. And I would say that I went to spring ball when I was still in high school out there.
Okay.
And that was like a huge learning curve for me.
For sure.
I went from simple offense, like hand signals and, everything, to being like, you're under center now and we're going to double call plays in the huddle. And it's like keep kill calls. So it's like, hey, if it's, this front, we can't run this play. So it's your responsibility that if this play is called and, anyway, so it was just very overwhelming for me. And like, I did spring ball and I vividly remember realizing really quickly that I was like, oh shit, like this is a huge step forward. It's not just like, oh, a little like baby step, like it's a JUCO, like, it was like most of the guys that I was playing with were capable of going Division I.
Right.
They just, for grades,
got in trouble, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think it was like my second or third day, our head coach was like, hey, we're doing a 2-minute drill. You're in. And I was like, oh shit, like, I was so nervous. And it's like the whole offense is lined up on one side, the whole defense is lined up on the other side. And I got in and I was actually like, okay, I'm kind of figuring this out a little bit. It helped being in 2-minute because I didn't have to think as much.
For sure.
That was my problem, is like I was just so overwhelmed with all the information that I just like couldn't react and couldn't play.
Yeah.
And I was great on the whiteboard and everything in meetings. And then I'd get to the field and it just like, I just couldn't piece it all together.
Yeah.
And I was doing well. And I remember he like stopped the whole practice as I'm like about to, snap the ball. And he comes and walks up, right, and like gets real close to me. And he puts his hands like this over, like next to my face, and gets like an inch from my face and goes, how many safeties are there? And I thought about it for a second. I was like, I could guess, and he's probably going to rip me, or I'll just be honest. And I was like, I actually don't know. And he just like, this isn't high school anymore. Like, just like ripped my ass. Like, he's like, you're done. Go back to the sideline. And I was just like,
damn.
okay, this is my intro to like college football. And it's just, yeah, it was just a crazy experience because it was just not, in high school, you know exactly what you're looking at. And I'm like, even early on, it was like, I remember taking a snap and it's, I take the snap and I drop back and I look up and I'm like, oh, that wasn't what it was before the snap. And
they
were like,
they disguised the coverage.
And anyway, so I redshirted my first year. Second year, I thought maybe I'd have a chance to compete. They had a bounce back from Cal. His name was Zach Klein. He was one of the top recruits in the country going to Cal, and he ended up coming to Butte College. So he ended up starting. And I just, at the time, like I wasn't really having any more fun.
Yeah.
Like it was just kind of a grind. Like I was pretty checked out. And so it just became clear to me that like, hey, like I'm ready to go to the next thing. And so, yeah, I applied to schools. I wasn't the best student in high school, but I got really dialed when I got to junior college because I was like, all right, this stuff actually matters.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I got in most places, and I grew up a Cal fan, like from the same hometown as Aaron Rodgers. My PE teacher at the time, his son played with Aaron.
Okay.
They're both from our hometown in Chico. And so like, I think I was in second grade when they committed to Cal. And then by the time I was in like third, fourth grade, I had season tickets with my dad, and we would go to 4 or 5 games every year.
Okay.
I just never thought that I was ever get into the school. Like it just never even like crossed my mind that was a possibility. Cause it was just like, that is up here. Like I'm going to go somewhere else, and no knock on anywhere else. It was just, I didn't feel like that was in the cards for me. So when I got accepted, it was just like, obviously this is it.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm going to Cal. Let's do it. Yeah.
And I actually ended up taking a visit there, even though I'd been there 30 times at this point. I'd never actually like gone there being like, if I want to go here,
right,
I can. And I'd never even bothered to like look at the school. It was always just like, you get there, you go to like, the beer garden place. And like my dad would get a beer and I would get a snack from the vending machine. We'd walk up the hill of the stadium, and like, that was it.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to be really good at school now. Like that's going to be my thing. Like I'm not playing football anymore. I've never not been an athlete.
Right.
And I did that for a semester, and I was like, well, this totally sucks. And so I ended up getting a job working for the football program. Like I kind of had potential thoughts of walking on.
Okay. So you're just like edging walking on a little bit by starting to work for the team.
Yeah. And then it just kind of turned into like, it was a really cool job. You were on like partial scholarship. You could travel with the team.
What were you doing for it?
Equipment.
Okay.
Yeah. So anything from like, I helped run practice. So you like spot the football, like you'd basically do anything and everything, to then like, once a week you'd rotate, because there was probably 10 of us. You would stay after practice and do laundry.
Right.
Which is like, I got really good at folding towels.
I bet.
Yeah. And so that was like a really cool experience. And I, going into that, I was like, okay, well, I'm really good on the whiteboard. I like feel like I know it pretty well. It was just like, I think my physical abilities were like my limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll be a coach. And that kind of, for a little bit, that was like the thing I thought I was going to do. And when I stopped playing football, that's where I found CrossFit, because it was kind of like the classic, like air quotes, like failed athlete. You're like, all right, like I still have these aspirations and I want to do something, but I'm not good enough to play like traditional sports.
Yeah.
And so I thought I wanted to be a coach until I made friends with some of the GAs.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, dude, we had I don't remember his name, but he used to hang out with us quite a bit. He was an assistant strength coach that lived in a closet in the weight room. It was a blow-up mattress, and there was in the spin room, and there was these huge mirrors that like actually opened up to like storage, and he literally just lived in there.
What?
And like all of them are working like 100-hour weeks.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, GAs have it bad, dude.
Dude, it's crazy. And
yeah,
people think coaching is sexy because you see like, oh, so-and-so coach signs however many millions of dollars. But it's like, well, if you saw how many hours he worked and how many times he moved and worked at like obscure places before that, like your mind would probably be pretty blown.
Right.
And so, yeah, I was like, all right, well, that's not what I want to do. So I was like, all right, that's when I found, I think representing athletes would be cool. And I was thinking about going to law school afterwards. And so that's kind of how like, I didn't really figure out that I wanted to like represent athletes and kind of do that until probably early 2018.
And is this while you're still in school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Seems like a great time though. to like to be able to get into it. So
Yeah.
at that point, when you said like, okay, maybe I want to start managing athletes, was a pathway to start doing that clear to you? Or did you have to just kind of start being like, all right, I guess it's time to start asking some questions?
Yeah, it was super unclear. I tried to get some internships like in the Bay with some agencies. Like one of our quarterback at the time was Davis Webb.
Okay.
And he went on to play for a few years in the NFL. And I think he's the Giants quarterback coach now,
Okay.
I believe. And I wasn't close with him by any means, but I was like around him every day. And I was just kind of like, hey, like, do you know anybody? And I think like I think he put out some feelers, but it just like nothing panned out. And so I was like, I ended up staying in the Bay between my junior and senior year, figuring like, all right, well, maybe I'll intern somewhere. That didn't really happen. So I ended up just working that whole like summer, basically just in the Bay.
Okay.
And I would bounce back and forth back home to Chico, which is like 2.5 hours. Like my girlfriend, wife now was there. Like we had a puppy. So like I kind of split time.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of funny story. It was the summer where we transitioned from Nike to Under Armour.
For Cal.
So me and my roommate worked over summer, and I remember our boss was like, hey, I'm going to Italy they were doing like a coach's camp.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't care where it goes, how you do it, but when I get back, all the Nike stuff has to be gone. And we were like, roger that. Okay. So we ended up, and I don't know, this is probably like not illegal, but I don't think many people knew about this, but we just backed our cars into the loading dock because like the whole stadium's on the top of a hill, and then the equipment room, the locker room, everything is underneath the stadium. And like the facility was empty, and we ended up like donating a bunch of stuff, and then we just grabbed a bunch of stuff. So it's like everyone in my family had like Nike shoes, like Cal stuff, like they still wear it today. And then I ended up, I think I donated, 100 pairs of gloves to my high school and like 100 pairs of leggings and all that stuff. But anyway, so I couldn't really figure out like the route. I was like, okay, well, I'll just go to law school, and that's 3 years, and I'll kind of figure it out from there. But before that happened, I ended up I was pretty into CrossFit. And I remember, I think it must have been December of 2017, because it was like in my senior year, and I was watching like Sunday Night Football, because my ritual was always like, I'd watch Sunday Night Football. When that was over, that's when I'd like start doing whatever like homework and stuff I needed to do. And I would just put on like YouTube videos in the background.
Okay.
And I put on a YouTube video, and it was Matt Fraser, Brooke Entz, and they were in Dubai for a CrossFit competition. And there was a guy that popped up on the screen, and like on the YouTube video, it had like his title below, and it was like Matt O'Keefe, Matt Fraser's agent. And I was like, huh, like CrossFit athletes have agents. Like that never crossed my mind.
So you were thinking the whole time like football. Okay,
like traditional agency, like I'm gonna go to law school, and so I was like, all right, I'm gonna look this dude up. So I looked up his Instagram, and he had, I don't think he had his phone number, but he had his email in there. So I shot him an email, and I was like pretty determined to like get this guy on the phone.
Right. And
it ended up taking, I think, almost 6 months to get him on the phone. Whoa. And it was like we'd schedule a call, and then he'd move the call, or it happened once or twice, and he'll probably laugh at this if he sees this. I would call him, and he'd answer to like at the scheduled time that we'd like decided upon. And then he'd be like, I'm actually busy. Like I'll call, like, let's like reschedule. And I was just like, fuck, like, because it was like this big thing. I remember like, I'm like, all right, I have this call with this guy in 10 minutes. Like I would go outside, and I would be like pacing, like thinking about what I was going to say. And it was like this big monumental thing for me. And like for him, he's just like, he was a super busy guy. And it was like some kid keeps pestering. You know?
So I have a question about that, because I read a book called The Third Door that's like entirely about this, and just being willing to like ask for mentorship and all this different stuff. How are you reaching out to this dude? And like, what was the burning question where you're like, I have to get in touch with this guy?
It was just, I think I realized that it was like, he was doing what I wanted to do. Like I wouldn't say I was like disenfranchised with football. It was just kind of one of those things where I was like, all right, I feel like I'm trying these angles and it's not working. And CrossFit had become this thing that I was super passionate about. And I saw it as a way to kind of like blend a lot of the things that I wanted to do. And it's funny because like, a lot of my wife and I have been together since like 2011.
Okay.
And, you know, when we were in college, she would always say like, I don't know what I want to do. Like I could do this, I could do that. Like it was kind of, I think maybe like a little paralyzing for her of being like, man, like
too many options.
Yeah. And she's very structured. And so it was like, when you get done with school, you're like, well, what's the next thing? And so I think she struggled with that a bit. And for me, she would say like, well, you're lucky because you want to represent athletes. Like, you know exactly what you want to do. That's like pretty cool. And I would think about it. And I remember like my response to her was like, well, okay, it is cool that I know what I want to do, but imagine knowing exactly what you want to do and not sure if you're able to do it. And so there was this like anxiety that was attached to that. And so it was more of like, hey, I know that if I just get in front of this guy, I'll kind of figure it out, because that's kind of how I got through like going to Cal was one of the most stressful periods of my life, because it was just like school was really hard. And my major was political economy, which I find super interesting, but I realized that like that's not what I'm going to make a career in. And so it was kind of just getting through, and I feel like I just learned how to learn and just figure shit out.
Yeah.
And so I built up at least that confidence, being like, all right, if I just get in front of this dude, like I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so it took me forever to finally get on the phone with him. And it's actually like a kind of a funny, like full circle story. One of my like very best friends in the world, Dylan Militsky, we can talk about him later, but he worked at the agency that Matt O'Keefe was working with. And the invite to the call that I actually finally talked to him, the invite came from Dylan, because they were driving together to a regional in Albany. And it's funny now knowing like getting on that call, O'Keefe had told Dylan like, oh, like, sorry, like I got to take this call with this kid who keeps bugging me, basically. And so I got him on the phone, and he kind of gave me the like, you know, it's a grind, and like, you know, I have an intern at the games, you know, most years. If you're interested, like it's going to be a lot, like it's kind of anything and everything. And I was just like, yep. Like I'm already actually going to the CrossFit games. Like a group of friends and I, like we booked our flights, we have an Airbnb, everything. So I was like, I'll already be there. Count me in.
So you signed yourself up to be his intern for the games at that point then?
Yeah, basically. So I was like, all right, cool. Like I have this internship. It was like a no question, like I'll do whatever.
Yeah.
And then about 2 weeks later, I found out that I got into Michigan for grad school, and I had ended up deciding to apply for sports management instead of law school, because I found that you don't actually need a law degree to represent athletes. You just need a postgraduate degree.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, I can do this faster, less expensive. And I kind of asked myself, if representing athletes doesn't work out, do you want to be a lawyer? And if the answer is not like unequivocally like yes, then 3 years of law school and all the money that goes along with that is probably not the move.
Yeah.
And so anyway, long story short, I found out I got into Michigan for grad school. I canceled my flight, and my mom, my dad, and I got in the car, and we drove from Chico, California to Madison, Wisconsin, which took us like 4 days, I think.
Okay.
And it was a cool experience because like my parents divorced when I was, 1 year old. And so I've actually never done anything with just the two of them like that. So that was pretty cool.
No family road trips growing up. Yeah.
Yeah. like it just like we would do things like somewhat separately. And they have a great relationship, but it was just, we had never done something like that. And so yeah, I got to the games to Madison on Monday, and literally like got there and like hit the ground running. Everything from did people's laundry to I got coffee orders to like, and I was like pretty committed of like, I got everyone's coffee order. I would get that in the morning, to the point where, I remember a time where I had gotten coffee in the morning. He was like, hey, meet me by this door by the warm-up area.
Yeah.
So I'm like, roger that. Like, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Get the coffee. I go there, and he's like, hey, I'm busy. I can't meet you right now, whatever. And I waited there so long that the cold brew fell through the cardboard like carrier, because it like had
got soggy.
Yep. Yeah. And so yeah, I did that for a week, and then the Monday after the games, I drove to Ann Arbor, and I started work for Michigan football that night. I got there at like 8 p.m. and I helped them do laundry till like midnight.
So you were on the equipment staff for that one too?
Yep.
Wow. So what was that like, getting a taste of like, okay, I think I kind of know that I want to do management for CrossFit athletes. I find a guy who's working with some of the top athletes in the space, get a chance to taste this, and now I'm back in Michigan, like doing an equipment job again. What was that feeling like after you'd gotten a taste of like the thing that you wanted to do? Was it an inspiring thing, or did it feel like you were kind of like, was it a little bit of a tease, I guess?
A little bit of both. Yeah. I would say it just like, it built a little bit of more anxiety, being like, okay, this is like, okay, now I for sure know.
Like it's possible.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd gone to Michigan with the thought of being there for 2 years, and you can do it in a year. And I was just like, man, like if it's anything like how it was at Cal, like doing it in a year is going to be too much. And then once, I think it was like my first week of class, like a lot of people around me were like, oh yeah, I'm doing it in a year. And so I ended up going to the counselor, like adding a few classes, and it ended up not being super challenging, honestly. And I really didn't have much contact with O'Keefe while I was, like a ton of contact while I was there. I was just kind of doing my equipment thing. I had reached back out about Wodapalooza because he owned an agency prior where he represented, like Matt and Katrin and Brooke Entz and a bunch of athletes. And then the guys who started Wodapalooza, Guido Trinidad, he's the owner of Peak 360. He ended up selling the company to a bigger agency in Miami called Loud and Live.
Okay.
And they specialize in like, they do marketing for big brands like, I think Walmart, McDonald's, a few like that. And then they're like promoters essentially for primarily Latin American music.
Okay.
But they're entrepreneurs, and they saw this large scale event, and they didn't know anything about CrossFit, but they saw, I think, like just an opportunity, a business opportunity.
Right.
And so they brought on O'Keefe to basically run the event, and he became the president of Loud and Live Sports. And so I was like, all right, well, that happened, I think, as I was like meeting O'Keefe. So it was fairly new for him.
Okay.
And so I had reached back out about going to intern again at Wodapalooza. And so I did. I flew down to Miami in January of, that would have been 2019.
Okay.
So early 2019. Interned there again, and like met a lot of the team. And like, again, it was kind of like that doubling down and being like, all right, like I've made the next step. And there was another intern there, which like when I got there, it was like a little bit disappointing because he made it pretty clear that he was there to do the same thing as me.
Right.
He wanted to do the same thing. And I remember just being like, I don't care what it takes.
Yeah.
I will do anything and everything to like make this happen. And I think that weekend from like Thursday to Monday, I probably slept 8 hours.
Yeah.
It was just like constant. And even to the point where like there was things that I didn't necessarily like need to do. It was just like, I'm not going to go to sleep and risk someone being like, hey, can you help me with this thing?
Right.
And like not be available. So I would just stay in the park till 3 a.m. and then I'm up at 6.
Yeah.
Just to like make sure that I'm there. And I think it was like maybe Saturday, they had asked us around midnight if we could help with some stuff because it had rained. So we needed to tarp up some of the tents in like Vendor Village. And the other intern that was there, he was like, I'm so tired. Like he was just like totally beat. And I remember being like, don't worry, dude, like get some sleep. I got this. And he was like, okay, yeah, cool. Thanks, man. And I remember like at that moment, I was like, I got you. Like, there's no chance that I would have been like, yeah, you take this and I'm going to just go to bed. And so I was able to meet a lot of the team, like I said. Yeah. And that's where I was like, okay, now I know this is what I want to do. And I also know now where I need to like basically move to. Like, what's my next step? Well, moving to Miami, that's my next step because that's where the agency is based out of.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that was in January. In March, I reached out and I was like, because they had asked me while I was there, they were like, hey, what are you doing after college?
Interesting.
And I remember like, we're going to need to hire people. And I remember being like, well, hopefully working with you guys. Like that is like, I don't have a plan B.
And were you and O'Keefe, were you guys like keeping contact between these events too? Or was it like, hey, I see that something's coming up. I'm going to like go balls to the wall to make sure I can get there. I'm going to get there and then figure it out.
That was kind of more what it was. We talked a little bit, but it wasn't like a frequent thing, you know?
So you guys aren't like building this ongoing relationship and stuff like that?
Not really.
Okay.
And like at the time, he had a lot going on. Like he lived in Boston. He would fly to Miami Tuesday mornings and leave Thursday night.
Okay.
And he was doing like, athlete agency stuff on the side, not on the side, but like, kind of in conjunction with that.
Yeah. And
he was responsible for that event really. Like the bottom line was like, hey, like you're looking at the budget, like that is your responsibility is like overseeing this.
Okay.
And so I had reached out probably like end of February. And I was like, hey, my spring break is coming up early March.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to come to Miami and like basically like interview with you guys. And like I kind of had to like force the issue because I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere by just like hoping they would reach out to me.
Right.
And so, yeah, for spring break, my wife and I booked a flight, got a Airbnb, which was a super sketchy Airbnb. It was literally a 2-bedroom apartment, and we didn't realize it, but we rented one of the bedrooms in the apartment with the people still living there. It was super strange, which now after living in Miami, it's like a little less strange.
Yeah.
But at the time I was like, what the hell are we doing?
Right.
And I showed up to the office, and it was actually, I think it was the day before my birthday. And we went to this really like famous donut spot it's called the Salty Donut in Miami. Got a bunch of donuts, brought it to the office because I like want to make a good impression. I was just spent a bunch of time with these people like 6 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
And I get there and nobody knew I was coming.
What?
And now like I've known O'Keefe now, for 7-8 years.
Uh-huh.
Knowing him now, I'm like, that checks out. But I was kind of like, hey, like I'm here, and everyone's like, what the hell are you doing?
Is this
I'm like,
DoorDash or?
Yeah. I was like, well, I think I'm hopefully like, meeting with all of you guys, and I remember they're like, hey, we're really busy today. Like, let's meet, this afternoon. And I was kind of like, okay. And my wife was working because she had graduated already. But I was on spring break. I'm like, I'm literally just sitting at this cubicle for a bit being like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm here to meet with these people. I can't seem to like meet with anybody. So we ended up going and looking at apartments. And my wife is super type A, so she had like the list of like all the places.
Yeah.
And the first spot that we looked at was across the street from the agency.
Okay.
So like the agency was in like a 7-story building, and literally like, I mean, as the crow flies, it's probably 200 yards.
Gotcha.
You just have to basically cross one big road, and then there's like, it's right there.
Okay.
And so that was the first place we went. We toured it, and we were like, I think this is it. It's nice. It's close to the office. Like, let's put our name down. So they had some openings for like about the time when I was going to graduate, put our name down. And I basically came back. O'Keefe still was like busy. So I ended up meeting with a few other people. And I remember being like, so I know where I'm going to live. I just need you to offer me a job now. Like, I'm literally going to live right there.
You're at the office saying this?
Yeah, because we're at like almost, I think it was the top story or second to the top.
So you can point to it?
Literally, I'm like, see those buildings right there? Like, that's where I'm going to live. And, I met with Marco, who was their like VP. I met with Dylan, who helped like run the event. I didn't actually end up meeting with O'Keefe until the next day at like 8 p.m. So I was there like 48 hours before I finally met with him. And
meanwhile, none of these people knew that you were going to show up. So you're just kind of like making it happen while you're there.
Yeah. And they were like super nice because they knew who I was. Like, I think I had like kind of ingratiated myself to the team.
Yeah.
And I remember Dylan being like, hey man, I'm just going to like shoot you straight. Like, we had no idea you were coming. Like, I don't even really know like what you're like interviewing for.
Yeah.
And I just like, it was like, again, kind of like building that like a little bit of anxiety of being like, dude, did I like read this wrong? And so it's my birthday. I finally I was like, hey, O'Keefe, like we leave in the morning. Like, I really need to meet with you about like whatever it is that you have in mind or don't. Like, I just need to know.
Right.
And I remember we sat down in his office, and one of the first things he said to me was, how much do you think you should make? And I hadn't really thought about it. And I was like, well, I graduated from Cal and I've interned with you twice and about to graduate with my master's degree. I was like, I don't know. I'm moving to Miami. Like, 60 grand seems like a fair starting point, I guess. And I'm kind of just shooting from the hip.
Yeah.
And he kind of just leans back in his chair. It was kind of like a chuckle, and maybe I'm remembering it that way. And
right.
Maybe he didn't really chuckle, but he was like, if you want to make 60 grand, go work on Wall Street. He's like, we'll pay you 40.
In Miami.
Yeah. And I remember feeling just so deflated because I'm like, okay, the first thought was well, we looked at a 2-bedroom. That is no longer in the cards. My wife's like, okay, well, I'm moving. I need to find a job.
Right.
And he was like, go to dinner and think about it. And I didn't even know what what the job was that I was going to do. I knew what I wanted to do.
Right.
But I was also pretty aware of the fact that I'm like, dude, he's not just going to be like, all right, go manage all these athletes. Good luck.
And and I would imagine at this point too, they might not even have a concrete role for you.
Mm-mm,
I would imagine. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. So we went to dinner and I just was like, dude, I'm so just like deflated, whatever. But I remember just thinking like, well, we either do this or we go back home and start from scratch. I was like, I have no choice, you know? And like, honestly, I think now, like in hindsight, it's like, we were fine. Like she got a job, like we weren't like crushing it, but like we were fine,
right.
you know? And I started off basically just like helping write invoices and helping with like partnership stuff for the event and like kind of sitting on some athlete calls. And this was beginning of June of 2019. And I was like, I do remember sitting in like our cubicle thinking to myself, I get why people like live for the weekend. I'm like, I'm literally just sitting in this cubicle and like, I don't really have much to do because the team was so small and they had so many things going on that like, they kind of gave me a little bit of help for like the first few days. But then it's like, hey, we have this, you know, Trello board we have to upload things to. And we have like, you know, this Slack where you message people and here's your email. And like, I just like didn't know like what was up and what was down. I kind of just had to figure it out.
Okay.
So I did that for a few months. And then the woman who was helping O'Keefe run the athlete side of the business was Matt Fraser's wife, Sammy.
Okay.
And she wanted to take a step back and kind of build her brand and help Matt and whatever. And I just remember this was probably November. I went into O'Keefe's office because I went in there to ask him a question. And he was like, answer the question. I left. He calls me back as I'm leaving and he goes, hey, Sammy's leaving in like next week, like officially. I'm going to give you her job. Don't fuck this up. And I remember just being like, holy shit, like, okay, like this is all I've ever wanted, you know?
And you're like a summer in?
Yeah. I mean, I was like 3-4 months in. And like, mind you, like that whole time, it wasn't like I was being necessarily mentored. It was like, I just kind of had to, again, like figure it out.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from when O'Keefe would fly in on Tuesday. He would go he had an office that my friend Dylan used while O'Keefe wasn't there. So like when O'Keefe was there, O'Keefe would sit at like the, you know, behind the office desk and Dylan would sit basically how we're sitting now. And that's how they worked. Well, I would just kind of figure out like, all right, well, I just need to get access.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first got there, one of the women that worked there was like, hey, I know that like you want to be close to O'Keefe and stuff, but like you're not going to get a lot of his attention. And I at first I was like, yeah, like you're not me. Like he's going to mentor me. Like I'm like his, you know, guy.
Yeah.
And like it turned out she was right. I mean, I mean, at one point I was doing his expense reports. Like it was like kind of being like an intern all over again. And I kind of just forced a role for myself.
Right.
But I learned a lot just literally sitting on the floor. So it'd be like, if you're O'Keefe, I'm Dylan. I would sit on the floor with my laptop in my lap for hours and just work from there.
Your posture must have been impeccable at that
You know,
point.
just like working on my flexibility.
Dude, so I got to know at this point. I think from what I'm getting from it, so you take O'Keefe, who you want to be your mentor, and you're like, I want to do athlete representation. Yep. You're willing to take a job for $40,000 in Miami, which is expensive as shit. And it's not even you're not even doing athlete management. It's like for the event that he happened to become the president of the company for, just so that you could get the FaceTime and like a potential mentorship with this dude.
Yeah, I think my role was production coordinator, which I don't even actually know what that means still. It was just kind of like, hey, here's kind of your thing, whatever.
Dude, I feel like there's so much in that though, because like I think especially with today, people want to jump straight to, well, if he's just going to tell me, no, I can't, like, he's not going to mentor me. I'm not going to take this job where I'm only making $40K a year and it's not even with him. And like, I'm just going to give up, or I'm just going to do something different. Like what was it that was going through your head where it's like, I don't care how little I get paid or how I get into contact with this guy. Like this is happening.
Yeah. I think going back to like being anxious about like not being able to do the thing you want to do, I realized that like, no matter what, like the kind of silver lining was like, I got my foot in the door. Like not only in my foot in the door, like I'm in the building, you know, like
yeah,
figuratively and literally. And so, I mean, as hard as it was also like, this is exactly what I want to do. I mean, dude, he would come in about 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning and like work all day. And like, mind you, like his family's in Boston. So when he's there, like he's just like working. And so the culture there was Tuesday and Wednesdays were like almost carbon copy. He would come into the office, we would be in the office till probably 9 p.m.
Okay.
And then there was a roll-up door underneath the office. There was a parking garage.
Uh-huh.
And there was a roll-up door where we stored a bunch of equipment for Wodapalooza. So there was like rowers and ski ergs and dumbbells and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We would work out as a team somewhere between like 8 and 9 o'clock, either there or we'd go to like a local gym. A guy who owned a gym in Miami called CrossFit's, Danny, he worked for us at the time. So we would sometimes go there 9, 10 o'clock at night. Then we'd go to dinner. And usually it'd be like, some like ale or a Miller's Ale House, like right down the road. Like we'd get like, burgers and whatever. And it's like 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Okay.
Then I would take O'Keefe back to his hotel. I would drive home, shower. I'd get in bed somewhere between like midnight and 1.
Right.
And then I'd wake up and pick him up by like 8 a.m. from his hotel. And we'd go to Starbucks. He would get 2 nitro coffees, both for himself. And then we'd go to the office. We'd do it all over again. And then Thursday, I would take him to the airport at like, 6, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then that was like our weeks. And I remember being like, my wife's a trooper because I just like basically didn't see her much during that period. But I remember just being like, this is awesome. Like, this is exactly like where I want to be, what I want to be doing, like with the people I want to be doing it with. So it was, as much of as a drag it was at times, I'm like, well, what else would I want to be doing? Like, I could be, working some random spot for something that I hate. Like, at least I'm like in the thing. So it was as hard as it was, I saw kind of the light at the end of the tunnel.
There's got to be a lesson in that where it's like doing the thing that you want to do is maybe just more important than what the beginning phases of that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, we get reached out to sometimes, people being like, oh, I want to do what you guys do. And I think for us, like, we know that we need to bring like good people on and scale to a certain degree, but it's also just like, hey, like we're small, like we may project bigger based on like the space that we're in, just like the CrossFit kind of fitness space, but like we're pretty big fish, small pond.
Yeah.
Right. And like, we're like, relatively speaking, we're a boutique agency.
Right.
We have a small team and it's like, hey, we can't give you like a guaranteed salary with benefits and stuff. Like, we don't have that. So it's like, if you want to come in and create a role for yourself, like by all means. And most people say no. We do have a guy, Zach Long, on our team who basically did just that. He reached out to Coop. This was prior to us merging our agencies and was basically like, I want to do all these things. I want to be an agent, and created a role for himself. And now he's like director of golf. Like, he's a huge part of the agency. He just basically travels the country and does his thing and does very well for himself. And like, he's an awesome dude. And so it's like, that's the type of people that we look for. I think like Coop has a similar story where it was like, he ended up getting into the agency world because his mentor, Jason, was a part owner of X Endurance and was the former CEO. And he was a sales rep for X Endurance.
Got you.
And that's how he got into the industry.
Yeah.
And then ended up, finally getting to the point where he moved out to Arizona, where X Endurance is based out of, and essentially helped take over, like helped start doing more with the agency, and then basically ended up taking over the agency. And so like, I think for Coop and I, that was like a lot of like, there was a lot of parallels there.
Yeah.
And prior to us merging, I was like, F this dude. He's like my competition. Like, he's like similar age to me, and it ended up just being one of those things where when we finally like met and like talked, and it was funny, we were just talking about this we were on the Boys Interrupted podcast with Jason and Dallin and Justin. And it was like, we met at Scott Stallings' garage. We were in Knoxville for an event. He's a PGA golfer that we work with.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like that Step Brothers moment where like, did we just become best friends?
Right.
And it was just like, we just whiteboarded and just like talked, and we were like, all right, like,
let's do this.
Yeah. So, but that's skipping forward a few steps, like just to kind of round it out. I ended up living in Miami. COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then, we lived in our 1-bedroom apartment for a bit. And then in July of 2020, we moved back home because we're like, I don't know if this is going to last 3 months or 3 years.
Right. And are you still working in the role that O'Keefe put you in at this point?
Yeah. So once he gave me that role, that's where like it shifted really quickly, because it went from like, I'm doing this production coordinator shit that I don't even really know what I'm doing, to like, you're just kind of like, Sammy gave me a Rolodex of brands and all the like contacts. She sent out like a mass email being like, hey, I'm leaving. This is your new point of contact. And like, that was kind of it.
And you've got a week to figure it out.
I mean, it was not even really like a week. It was kind of just like, this is what you're doing now. At least in the short term, I was still doing some of the production role.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, within 6 weeks of him telling me that, I went to Brooklyn with O'Keefe to the Noble Film Festival. I went to London for the Strength and Depth, and then we went to Dubai. And I was like, okay, like now, like this is it. Like I've like kind of in my mind, it was like, all right, you've made it. Like there's still a lot of learning to do, but at least now like this, you've achieved the thing that you set out to do. And now it's like where it really just kind of begins.
Yeah.
And so I ended up doing that. We moved back home, like post-COVID or like during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we still paid for our apartment for 6 months because I didn't know if I was going to have to go back.
Right.
Until finally I basically came to the conclusion that like I've built up enough of like a reputation. I'm doing a good enough job that like he's not just going to fire me, but like I'm going to stay in California. And so we worked at Loud and Live until we didn't leave until March of 2022. O'Keefe and I left together.
Okay.
He went to go start HWPO with Matt. And we were going to start our own agency. And we basically brought all the athletes with us because it was just like, hey, nothing's changing. Like I'm still your point of contact. Like as far like I could probably not tell you that we're leaving and you wouldn't know.
So you and O'Keefe went together then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so it went from, I mean, it didn't change a lot for me as far as like, I was kind of, O'Keefe would help from time to time.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I'm on an island, but I was doing a lot of it just solo. The only downside was it was like, Loud and Live can be a little corporate and they don't really understand CrossFit. So like, it was kind of nice not to have to like adhere to some of those things anymore.
Okay.
And then we started a new agency. We called it Title Sports. And that was March of 2022. And then by like August, we had basically decided that we were going to merge with Lab. We met with them. We had met before. We met at the CrossFit Games. We decided we were going to do this. And then January 1st of 2023, we announced like the official merger.
Gotcha.
And then we've been doing that since.
Damn. So during the moments, one of the things that I struggle with a ton is like, there's been a lot of goals that I've set out to achieve since I was, 21, 22 and started like first getting internships and doing all this stuff. And I struggle a ton with once I actually like get to the dance and start doing the things that I set out to do. It's really hard a lot of times for me to like recognize that in the moment and be like, dude, I'm doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you had those 6 weeks where you're like flying to London, you're going to Dubai, you're doing all this stuff. Were you able to actually give yourself the recognition that you had like done the thing and showed up like at the dance you were trying to get to?
Yes. I would say like the thing that I've only recently I've started to kind of overcome is just that like imposter syndrome of being like, okay, like how are people going to take me seriously? Like, and especially like given, I was 24.
Right.
And I'm like starting to like represent athletes that O'Keefe has worked with for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years that are, in their 30s or their late 20s. I'm like, man, like how, like, are people going to take me seriously? Like I'm super new. I'm super young. Like really all I had going for me was like, I just gave a shit, like a lot.
Right.
And I was just like willing to just grind. But I mean, if I could look back and like, sit and be a fly on the wall of some of like the conversation that I'm like, man, you like, it's pretty clear you don't know shit.
Yeah.
But you kind of, I mean, like, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but it was kind of just like learning by fire.
Right.
And so I did realize that I was like, I'm in the thing, which is, I guess, is a cool thing to realize. And I think I realized that early on when I moved to Miami, because I was like, this is it. Like I thought this is what I wanted to do and I'm correct. And I'm in the spot where I need to be. Like this is where I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say yes. Like I was able to kind of recognize that in real time, but there's also like, again, like anxiety with that. Cause you're like, man, like I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah.
Like it's like one small mistake that turns into something big. Like, especially when you're like, there's a lot of responsibility in like managing people's livelihoods.
Yeah, and you're talking about people too, that like combined following, hundreds of millions of people are following the people that you're representing.
Yeah.
If not more.
Yeah. I mean, it was like kind of, I definitely built a reputation for myself, but I mean, it was kind of like being handed the keys to like really like a Ferrari. I mean, like early on, it was like, we were representing like all the people that were winning the CrossFit Games, like Matt and Tia and Katrin and, we had Laura Horvath at the time. And it was just like, And I think too, like that's something that I've had to learn as far as like how, like not having too much emotion on my sleeve and like taking my own advice, you know, telling athletes like, hey, like you just got to put your best foot forward. And if like this is your best effort and you couldn't have done anything better, like being okay with that.
Right.
But I think even just like personally, you know, you have a CrossFit Games, let's say, where like people don't do as well as they want to. And like you're used to like things just going really well for people.
Yeah.
And so having to kind of like deal with that and help people work through that. And like, you know, it's definitely like a results based business, just like most things.
Yeah.
So it's like, there is those, I mean, being an athlete sounds sexy until like you see how much work they have to put in. And then it's like, all right, well, if I don't do X, like, am I going to lose partnership dollars? Am I going to have to like work a, you know, like a real job? Like,
right.
you know, there's a lot of anxiety there. And so it's kind of like helping like quell some of those anxieties,
yeah.
you know, while also like swallowing like my own anxieties about that stuff,
you
know?
For sure. So what was it like when you've got, I mean, you probably got in that email, I would imagine the amount of brands that were on that list were out like things that would have taken like years and years and years and years to ever get a contact point for any of those. All of a sudden I would imagine that like every big Nike, Under Armour, Noble, like whoever you want is on this list of contacts. And you've got the contacts for like the biggest names in the sport. How do you deal with that imposter syndrome those first couple times that you like walk into a room and meet Matt or walk into a room and meet an exec at Nike or something like that? Like being 24, 25, how do you manage that dynamic?
I don't know. I think in some ways you can't think about it too much because I think it can be a little bit like paralyzing.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, it's just one of the things that I tell myself a lot is, you know, because I get people that say like, oh, you have like a really cool job. Like, oh man, you're in Germany for work. And it's like, yeah, but don't ever apologize for having like a cool job that you love because it didn't just happen overnight. And so I think like kind of hanging my hat on like, this didn't like, yes, don't get me wrong. Like it fast tracked my career. Like O'Keefe fast tracked my career.
Right.
But I also put myself in a position to like, be able to kind of grab that thing once it was presented in front of me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, oh, now I have to go do this thing to then come back to do this. It was like, I knew where I wanted to be. And so just kind of hanging my hat on the fact, like I've done that work. I've done everything that I'm capable of doing to this point to put myself in the best spot to be successful. And now you just kind of got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the thing that just kind of trying to be personable, just meet people, like admit that you don't know everything, you know, like be a little bit vulnerable at times. And I think people respect that because I think there's a lot of people that try and fake their way through things and be kind of like, I don't know, macho about it. And it's just like, I think people see through that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful for kind of the platform that was built for me to kind of grow from. Because I think, you know, Coop and I have definitely grown the agency past where O'Keefe and Jason were able to like grow it to. And like part of that is just they had other things that took them away from it. Like they could have done similar stuff. That was like their sole focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't build it on my own.
For sure.
You know, and I also know that, and it's only dawned on me recently, you know, now that we're getting into other spaces, like getting into women's flag football, that Jason and O'Keefe did a huge, or like they were able to accomplish a huge feat by truly setting the market for these CrossFit athletes, because they collectively, you know, Matt had Fraser and Katrin and all these big athletes. Well, like Jason was the first agent in CrossFit and he had Josh Bridges and Camille, and he helped bring Nike into the space. And like, they really built this foundation of like, there's a lot of value in these athletes. This is a growing sport. And kind of like, if you are a brand and you want access to these athletes, like here's kind of like the barrier to entry. And so they were both able, I think collectively, without even necessarily realizing what they were doing, is set the bar high for these athletes to be full-time athletes.
Got you.
And I found that, you know, within recently us learning more about flag, and we signed Izzy Geraci, who's one of the top players for the U.S. women's national team, that the market isn't there yet, right? So it's like at this point, the brands are doing well because there's a huge demand for flag. It's growing. You know, the entities, call it USA Flag or whoever, right? They're making a lot because these, you know, big brands like Under Armour are paying for, you know, the exclusivity and the naming rights and all that stuff. And it seems to be in most sports like that are new, the athletes are the last people to kind of catch up to that curve.
Interesting. So as a management agency, then you guys are helping build that foundation just like they did for CrossFit.
That's the goal, I think. And it didn't dawn on me, like, honestly, until maybe a week or two ago. We went to an event in LA to support her, and it was like meeting a lot of people and kind of getting the lay of the land a bit, and like realizing that, like, man, like most of these girls really aren't, they all for the most part are, you know, in school, work other jobs.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, it's still very new, but I think for us, it's like, okay, well, how do we elevate the opportunities for them?
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight, you know, because everything is grading on a curve, basically, right? So it's like, if you have kind of an outlier athlete who's huge, you know, call it like Diana Flores. She's probably the most followed, you know, flag football girl in the world.
Right.
She's been, you know, kind of in commercials and whatnot with, you know, the NFL and things like that. Like, if she's the 100%, they're going to grade like, you know, payment wise on a curve to, they're not going to pay people like essentially more than her.
For
right?
sure.
And so it's just like, how do we help athletes build their brand to create more value? Because at the end of the day, like, you have to provide value for the partners, and people have to kind of give a shit like what you're up to.
Right.
So anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent, but the point is like those guys really set the bar for the space and like for Coop and I to be as successful as like I think we've been.
Okay. So once you guys, you kind of helped round out the story a little bit from when you guys you left with O'Keefe, you ended up doing this merger with Lab. Talk to me a little bit now what the picture looks like, and like catch me up from that moment where you guys merge with Lab. You've got a team that you guys know works really well. What happens between then and now?
Yeah, I think, well, first off, it was nice having a team.
Yeah.
Not having to do kind of everything by yourself, and being able to like bounce ideas off of each other, because it's hard, because if, you know, Coop is still your competitor, you're not going to like bounce an idea or be like, hey, so-and-so is thinking this, like, what do you think? Like, you don't want to give them that tidbit of information.
Yeah.
So that was super helpful, I think, to start. And then since then we brought on Zach, and he was with us prior to the merger, but he's really like accelerated his role.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been nice is, you know, I have an 18-month-old, you know, Coop doesn't have kids yet, but like, you know, we've all kind of done the travel thing where we travel everywhere all the time, and it's being able to limit that. So like for us, we just give Zach like essentially like a travel stipend. We're like, hey, we want you on the road, just doing your thing. And so being able to kind of like divide and conquer those things, or like, hey, we can't be somewhere, but like, Zach, can you be there for someone?
Right.
And then, you know, now having, you know, the marketing side of the agency, you know, I think prior to that, it was a lot of like Coop doing that semi-solo with a little bit of help of Michelle, who essentially runs our marketing division of the agency.
Yeah.
But because of the merger, because of, you know, the increased, you know, exposure to other brands, and now we have like a lot more athletes, you know, collectively.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to able to like really scale, divide and conquer a bit. Like, now we can pour a little bit more energy into the marketing side. Coop can oversee that a little bit more, and I can pick up the slack on other things. So it's kind of like a whole push situation where, you know, I think overarchingly we're able to just do a lot more and be a lot more efficient and reach a lot more people. And kind of going back to like the point of, I don't want to say cornering the market, but like now we have collectively a lot of the top athletes in the space.
Right.
So now even more so, it's like we have a better idea of like, you know, what's a good deal versus a bad deal, and what does the market look like? And you have a good idea of that beforehand, but now it's like even more so, because you just have that many more data points to compare against of like, where are we at in the space? What's, like I said, what's a good deal? What's a bad deal? And so you're able to have kind of a little bit more of like a litmus test of how do we grow? Like, where are we realistically at? So it's not necessarily like one specific thing that's, I think, been like the most helpful. It's just all those little pieces, I think now are at a point where we're working together very well as a team. Yeah. So
paint a picture for me, and for the people who aren't as familiar with like what Lab does and like where you guys live in the space, paint a picture a little bit about like the niche that you guys have like really cornered the market and like you talked about, and then like what you do for all of these athletes, because I don't think a lot of people really understand everything that goes into the thing that they see on Instagram or when they see somebody on a commercial and stuff like that. Like, give me kind of like the behind the scenes on everything that you guys do and like what that picture looks like for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, the simplest ways to explain it is we help athletes get endorsement deals.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and our primary niche is CrossFit. We've scaled a bit past that, but like that's like the core of our business. And I mean, CrossFit athletes don't make a lot in competition. I mean, you figure like how much it costs to travel to a competition, and then, you know, your registration fees, everything. And it can look sexy when you win the CrossFit Games and you get a check for 300 grand.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're sixth place, it's like 30 grand.
Right.
And so it's like, if you're working your whole year for this thing and you win 30 grand, like it's nothing to scoff at, but it's also like, that's not a ton of money to live off of, you know?
Right.
And so that's like, I guess would say the primary role. Secondary would be, and this is kind of what Lab was really like built on, was helping athletes build their brand to where they have something to kind of lean on once they're done.
Okay.
And like, that's not necessarily true for everybody. Like not every single athlete, like we're helping them like, you know, build their brand, kind of similar to Josh Bridges.
Right.
But the goal would be to have, when athletes are done, they at least have an idea of what they might want to do and be able to monetize that. And if we're able to help them, then that's the goal.
Okay.
Is to have, you know, clients, but, you know, athletes for the long term. What was the other part of your question?
I was looking for your help painting a picture of like, if somebody was like, so we've had this whole entire story. What does Lab do now? Like, what does the entire picture look like?
So yeah, those are the two things. And then now it's, you know, I think the marketing side plays hand in hand with the like building athletes brands, because we do marketing, digital marketing for primarily businesses and health and wellness.
Yeah.
Just because that's kind of what we know. You know, we meet a lot of people at Wodapalooza and things like that, and like most of them tend to be kind of skewed in that direction. And so we do, you know, everything from email campaigns and Google and Meta ads, and, you know, we help with you know, influencer kind of management, things like that. But then because we have that team, we're able to help athletes in like what they want to do. So it's, if, you know, someone comes to us and says like, hey, I would love to start a program, or I would love to start, you know, an apparel company. It's like, we can help with facilitating everything. And we have the kind of the know-how to do that and help them build that brand. So like, I would say in a nutshell, that's like, when you boil it down to its simplest forms, it's helping athletes make more money so that they're able to do what they want to do full time.
Right. What are some of the misconceptions that people have as far as like maybe newer athletes or people who are getting into the space? I think that it's really easy for people on the outside to be like, okay, so you just get really good at CrossFit, and then you take some iPhone videos and people start following you. And if you win a couple games, all of a sudden you're going to have all these followers, and then you just get brand deals and you're making a lot of money. Like, what are the misconceptions from how that actually goes and how much like effort goes into building that brand versus some of the things that you hear when people don't have a good understanding of it?
Yeah, honestly, I would say if you flash back a handful of years, that was probably like, honestly, you weren't far off of like, hey, like, you know, you do well at a few competitions, like CrossFit's going to kind of prop you up. The market was booming and you gain a huge following. If you look at a lot of athletes from, call it 2014 to 2019, they have huge followings. Yeah. Like some of the top people. And then now, like, you look at people and it's a lot harder because like everyone wants to be an influencer. You know, like the CrossFit media team was essentially like disbanded. And so I think they early on did a good job of kind of propping up some of those athletes and helping like promote their brands, and they grew really quickly. And now it's definitely harder. It's like, how do you not only like just being good at CrossFit can be good enough if you're like the best, but like there's just a lot more of like, are you interesting? Are you providing value to your followers? Like, and that can look a lot of different things, right? It can look like advice. Like, I mean, some people just like, I know a lot of people just want to see like, what is Justin doing in training? Yeah. Like, that's like people just do, like, they're very curious about that. So it's kind of finding out like what speaks well to your audience and recognizing that like, hey, just being good at CrossFit isn't enough. Like, you have to also like deliver, you know, if you're supposed to do X amount of posts per month for, you know, partners, you have to do that, because at the end of the day, like if you're not providing value, like there's nothing, like, what are we even talking about?
For sure. Yeah.
I do think that one thing that people, I guess a misconception potentially is, we see a lot of like an athlete, maybe they're younger or they've been at it for a while and they finally make it to the CrossFit Games.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I need an agent now. And it's like, not necessarily, right? Like just because you had a little bit of success, and this is no like knock on people. It's just like kind of going back to the original point of like, I don't know yet what we would like do for you.
Right.
And so we do have quite a bit of conversations where it's, you know, an athlete reached out and it's like, hey, like, we're not going to necessarily officially work with you, but like, feel free to send us an agreement, talk to us about something like, hey, I got this company saying this, like we're at the end of the day, like we want this space to be successful and we want athletes to be successful.
Right.
So it's like, we're more than happy to give people advice on whether that's in depth or just being like, hey, I would recommend these 3 things.
Yeah.
Or, hey, keep doing what you're doing. And like, let's continue to talk. If you need any support, like, you know, your shoes rip, it's like, we can help you with that.
Right.
Right. Things like that. And I think for us, it's just building the reputation of just doing right by our people, I think is where we've gotten to where we are.
Got you.
And I think that sometimes people look at like, oh, you're just agents that just kind of like leech off of athletes. And, you know, it's just like, look, I get it to a certain extent because I think sometimes agencies get a bad rap because that does happen, unfortunately. I would just say for us, it's like, I would just let our actions kind of speak louder than what we're saying. And I think that if you talk to, you know, current and even former clients, like I would like to think that most of them have very positive things to say. And, you know, we're not perfect and we've lost some athletes. And I think like even then it's not something that we did this drastic thing that screwed them over. It was just like, hey, like we're just looking to kind of go in this whatever direction, or we feel like, you know, this agency is a little bit better fit for us. And we're just super transparent. And, you know, we're not the type of people that are like, hey, we're interested. Here's a contract, sign it. It's like, hey, let's talk.
Yeah.
You should go talk to other agencies. Come back to us if you still think that we're the right fit, and we can, you know, continue that conversation. But we just don't ever want to be transactional.
Right.
I think for us, it's like building kind of a family within Lab. And I mean, when we signed Izzy, I met with her in Columbus at the Arnold because she lives in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then we bought her a flight to come to Boise and hang out for a few days. And it's just like, hey, let's whiteboard and let's just get to know each other more. And it's like, now she has hung out with my daughter and she knows my dog and like she spent time with my wife, and like it's small stuff, but that stuff's important.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's like it's not necessarily the question you asked, but I think one of the misconceptions with people is like, oh, well, you're just an agent that like, you know, can, you know, you screw people over, you just leech onto, you know, athletes and make money off of their coattails and things like that. And I just think I don't believe that that's the case, you know?
Gotcha. So. When you say that like your guys' main mission is to help people make athletes outside of help athletes make money so that they can continue to do the thing that they love to do. It's interesting to me now because it seems like when somebody signs up to do that as their career, to be a professional athlete in the CrossFit or like HYROX or whatever that space is, it seems like a lot of people know now that they're also signing up to be a content creator. Like it seems like those two things are very much hand in hand. And I'm curious for you, like, how does that affect athletes that just really love doing CrossFit or really love doing HYROX or whatever it is, but they're like, fuck, I know that part of the job is just I have to do content also.
It's a good question. That's been like a challenging thing for, I think, more so the athletes that were kind of around and like very popular, like pre-COVID, I'd say.
Okay.
Because I think back then it was like the market was booming. CrossFit was like growing so quickly. You kind of like, yeah, you had to create content, but it wasn't like it is now. You
could just like kind of catch CrossFit's wave and then you're good.
Yeah. And I mean, like a lot of it was just like, here's me training.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, like, you know, and there wasn't anything inherently wrong with that. Like it worked for the time. And I think that like a lot of brands had a lot of success partnering with athletes just doing that because like this space was just in a very healthy spot.
Yeah.
And I think it's twofold now. Like the market isn't what it used to be. And obviously there's been a lot of things that I don't think we need a whole nother podcast to get into as pertains to why I think the market's at where it's at.
With CrossFit specifically?
Yeah. But then also like you just have like a huge influx of people that are just like influencers. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the thing that athletes have to kind of balance is like a little bit of a chicken and the egg is like they're, in my opinion, like they're athletes that have influence over like the space that they're in. Okay. So they still have, it's, you know, it's synonymous with influencer. It's a little bit cringy for me because it's like most of our people are training from, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then they take a 2-hour lunch break and then they're back in the gym for another 3 hours.
So they're like true professional athletes.
Exactly. Yeah. But you still have to create the content and you have to, show up for appearances and photo shoots and whatnot. And so I think what I've learned is a few things. One, it's like, hey, take the low hanging fruit opportunities, right? It's like creating some small bits of content around like post-recovery shake and what that looks like and like why you do it. Like people that are following you care about that stuff.
Right.
Because it's interesting because I want to know like, how do you recover? Like, oh, like what is your thought process on like before you hit this workout? Like just sharing those tidbits of things that don't require, like you're doing it anyway.
Right.
I think that goes a long way. And then it's also like a lot of our athletes have, hired full-time or part-time or full-time videographers around them. Because I think in the perfect scenario, that's the best case. And I think that the best like litmus test for that right now, and other athletes are catching up to that, is actually Justin. Because his friend Dallas, who he's known for a long time, he shoots all of Justin's YouTube, shoots all of his Instagram. And it kind of it's like this really awesome relationship where like Dallas is able to do the thing that he wants to now full time because of the opportunities like with Justin. And then he's over at the house training and hanging out anyway. So he's kind of just capturing what Justin would already be doing.
Right.
And then we're able to like, you put it in a long form on YouTube and people are really interested to see like, what is he doing on a day-to-day basis? And then we can take those things and clip them and put them into YouTube Shorts and Instagram and things like that because it's organic. Like it's not a fake thing. It's not bullshit. It's like, hey, he's really just making a protein shake, talking about the workout he's about to do. Like people are interested in that. And then they kind of like feed into themselves.
Right. But he's not sitting there being like, I'm going to be an influencer. It's just like, he's just got somebody there who's like, hey, we're already doing it. So let's capture it.
Well, and it is a hard thing too, right? Because like with people like with Justin, right? It's like, he's won the CrossFit Games twice and people are like, oh, like the champ. And like, they expect him to kind of be back on that pedestal.
Right.
But it's also like, okay, if you're a brand, it's like, there's a lot of value in working with the champ, but then sometimes it's hard to kind of separate like, oh, we need you to come do this, photo shoot or, like, and it's not in any way like malicious. And honestly, everyone that we work with is really great at like managing those things. But like, given the fact that he's competing so much this year, sometimes it's hard to kind of navigate like the things you have to do to be a good partner, but also it's like the expectation is to win.
Right.
And so it's kind of a hard dichotomy to work through at times
because you might screw up your training if it's like I have to go out to LA for a week to go shoot all these brand deals and then come back.
Yeah, and so it's finding the balance, right? It's always a compromise. There's always a give and take. I would say that some of our people are better than others at being kind of like the influencer, and I think part of that just becomes if you have someone, and like we get reached out to a lot by people like, oh, I think I want to start a YouTube. Like, I don't really know where to start. I'm going to like, hire someone that lives, far away to come in, a few times a month and shoot a bunch of content. And then we can like bank that and do stuff with it, which like it works.
Right.
But I think the best case scenario for anyone would be find someone that isn't maybe the most talented, but it's someone that they're most comfortable with and it's close in proximity, because you want the person that's like around and it doesn't feel like an interview or you're having to like fake anything. It's like you want the person that can be around in like your low times and your high times, and they're going to be there anyway. And so you can just capture that. And it doesn't mean you have to share everything, but like, I mean, last year at the CrossFit Games was like, a low point for a lot of people, obviously. And we didn't end up releasing most of it, but it's like Dallas was there and like some super raw moments that if it was somebody else, we'd be like, hey, like now's not the time. But he's just kind of like around. And so I think that just works really well. And other athletes have caught on to that. And I think, like Dallin and Jason have done a good job of continuing to build that and getting better at content and, them starting the podcast. And I think it's just finding creative ways to create just interesting stuff that you're interested and your followers are interested, and it doesn't quite feel like a job.
Yeah.
Because when it starts to feel like this like burden and like this weight of having to create and impress, and now you kind of feel like you're like a billboard, and it's like that's just not the recipe success for you or for the partners that you're working with.
Right.
Like, it has to be authentic, and we're at the point now where we're like, hey, athletes got to try the product first, whatever it is. Like, I'm not interested in faking it. I'm not interested in bullshit. I'm like, if they're not using it, we're not going to go down that route.
For sure.
It just ends up being a headache for everyone. And so it's just trying to create, I think, the most authentic relationships that you can. And we don't bat 1,000 on that, but we try to.
I would imagine too that there's probably a little bit of like scarcity and demand that you can create where it's like, we've got, X amount of content pillars or whatever that we release all the time. And this is just what the training regimen looks like. Like there's a supplement stack for pre-workout stuff. There's some for post-recovery. And then there's like a sauna, a cold plunge. There's a little bit of travel stuff, but like this is kind of the ecosystem that exists already. And we're not doing any more stuff that doesn't fit into what allows this person to be a world-class athlete.
Yep.
So unless you're willing to pay to be a part of that thing, we're not adding things to this person's regimen. It's going to be your brand or somebody else's.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to it's finding the balance of making sure that athletes are being able to be full-time, like I mentioned, and earn enough to train full-time, but you don't want to dilute their brand.
Right.
And
by being salesy all the time.
Yeah. And like, I mean, at a certain point, right? Like there's athletes that it's like, hey, like categorically, like it becomes hard. Like you have a apparel deal and a footwear deal, and then a wearable, and like there's, you try and look at, in some ways you have to look at every athlete and like look at the categories they have open. And like, that's what you're able to essentially sell.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, you don't want to ever reach this point where like, it's just super diluted and like their share of voice. If you're a brand, you're like, you don't want to feel like your share of voice is just getting drowned out by like all of these ads and other partners. And so it's finding the balance of like earning as much as you can while also like delivering value.
Right.
I mean, like, it's in a perfect world, you'd have Walmart would come along and be like, hey, we want to be your partner for everything. And it's like, all right, cool. So it's weighing that it's everything's an opportunity cost. It's like, if you say yes to this, creatine and electrolyte company, well, it's like, well, you might be taking a supplement company off the board, even though like they have, this company doesn't have protein and this one does. It's like, you don't want to split hairs too much.
Right.
I think there's like a time and a place to like carve some stuff out depending on what some brands are looking for. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to be someone who's like, you sign with an apparel and footwear deal, but you're like, hey, like we want to be able to sell tank tops still. And like, hey, like hats are kind of off the table, and you guys do running shoes only, but we want to be able to do like this other footwear deal. It's like, we just try and be realistic and honestly just approach things with common sense.
Right.
And it's like just putting yourself in the brand's shoes, and it's like, hey, would I be open to doing this?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, everything's case by case.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't have like a, hard like rule on things per se.
Yeah.
But we just try and understand like, if you're a company, like what is your definition of success? Mm-hmm. Like I hate when people reach out and they're like, hey, we're interested in, Jason, can you send me his rate card? I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what do you want? Like, what are you looking for? Like, are you looking strictly like, hey, we need to track ROI and it has to be like, if we spend X, we need Y? Is it brand awareness? Like, do you want, high quality content for ads? Do you want UGC content? Like those things all matter because like, I don't need, like, if you gun to my head, like I could give you a rate card.
Right.
But like, let's actually get on a phone call and like talk about your company, why you want to work with this person, how we can deliver value. And that usually tends to like set people up for greater success, like long-term, because we're not really interested in like one-off stuff.
Right.
Like it happens. And, we did a few one-off things with like a Chipotle, we'll call it, like has reached out and they wanted to do signature stuff with athletes. And it's like, totally.
Right.
But in large part, the goal would be like you sign with a partnership deal, you're with that brand 4 years later.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah. I really like the advice that you had for people to like find a videographer that they're comfortable with, somebody that can be around for like most of the stuff. So you're not just trying to do these like big content batches all at once. For some of those athletes who might come to you guys and not be entirely ready to work with an agency yet, or they're just like not at that point in their career, what are some of the actionable tips that you would give people who might not have the money yet to hire a full-time videographer, who might be doing their own brand deals and stuff like that? Like, what are some of the actionable items and some of like the targets that they should be shooting for to maybe like prepare themselves to someday work with an agency and like kind of reach that next level?
Yeah, I think if you're in a spot where, and we run into this, where, hey, I'm working full-time for maybe not very much money, and I need X amount of dollars to be able to train enough to like be competitive at the CrossFit Games or whatever competition. Like, yeah, you might have to take some deals that are maybe short term, or you're not, you know, super sold on the thing, whatever. But in large part, it's like if you're able to be somewhat patient, I think that's like a huge, huge thing, because it becomes hard when maybe you're a younger athlete and you say yes to this drink company or this apparel company, and they're not paying you much, and they're kind of like, you become kind of like a billboard,
right?
But you're really, you're a small brand, like brand meaning like the athlete brand is small. You don't have a huge following. Well, then you have a little bit of success, and all of a sudden, like, it becomes hard to kind of like delineate of like, you know, sometimes brands don't want to be the second or third company that you've worked with. Right. So it's like, kind of, if you believe in yourself, looking towards like the greater future, and don't just like, you know, we see it a lot with teen athletes,
right?
I think they get a little bit of like FOMO, and they're looking around, and it becomes this thing where they just say yes to someone for like, you know, free clothes. And I'm like, you don't need to kind of like, I don't want to call it sell your soul.
Right.
But building towards that like long-term future, I think is important.
So like sit on your hands with some of these deals until it gets to a point where like, even if it's not a great cash deal, it's like you're working with somebody that you believe in, or somebody that you could see a long-term relationship with.
Yeah. And it's something we talk about a lot. It's like, it's kind of a cliche, but it's true, is like comparison is a thief of joy. So like we'll see like I use the teen athlete example, because you'll see a teen athlete maybe say like, oh, well, so-and-so like signed with Reebok, and like, I want to be with Reebok. And it's like, well, more than likely they're just giving them, you know, free stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but like, that's not paying the bills. That's not building toward like the long-term, like professional athlete that you want to be. So I think that's probably like the first and most important thing. And then from the content side, I think people would be shocked sometimes. Like you see like a reel and you're like, oh man, this looks like it was shot professionally and this and that. But like what we've actually learned is, and just seeing it through the back end, like with Justin, if Justin posts a video that Dallas creates and it's like slow-mo and Dallas edited it and it's like, it looks like movie quality, the engagement is half of what it would be if like literally it's like, hey, I'm gonna take an iPhone video of me hitting a max lift and just post that. That gets way more engagement, and it feels like it's like more compelling and real. And I think like I think it would just shock people how easy it is to create like interesting stuff based off of like the sport that you're in. I mean, I think if you were to hit a workout and you were to give someone a phone and say like, hey, record 10-second clips of me hitting every movement, and then you edit them together to make a reel and you talk about the workout that you're doing, that's going to do better than you creating this like kind of fictionalized, staged thing. Perfect music, perfect color grade, perfect all the stuff. Yeah. And that's where it goes back to like, just do the simple things well. Yeah. Like low hanging fruit. It can be complicated, but like, I think people overcomplicate it. Okay. Do you think that, for athletes who, again, they might be in their full-time job and stuff like that, I look at Cam Hanes, and I think that one of the biggest reasons that he blew up is because of how relatable he was. You know, like so much of his stuff, yes, a Rogan appearance helps with blowing your brand up. But outside of that, it's like you've got a guy who's working his full-time job. He's bow hunting. He's training for ultras. He's doing all of this stuff. But in the meantime, I think what he was really good at is he was like able to look at what are the interesting parts of my life and just document each of those. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hey, you know, during my off time, I carry this rock up this hill and I do this thing. And people are like, well, dude, there's big rocks by my house and there's like a hill over there. So I could do that too. Yeah. You know, and I think that one of the things that is cool about that advice is anybody can go, okay, well, I already have an iPhone and I'm already like training, and maybe I wake up really early because I'm working a day job, or maybe I'm like trying to get these brand deals or have whatever going on. And if they hear, they're like, oh shit, iPhone content actually performs better than a lot of the edited stuff. It removes a lot of those barriers of like, I can't do this until I get a brand deal. I can't do this until I get a professional videographer. Yeah. Like it's all right there. I think, and I don't like, this is just my opinion, but I think one of as many awesome things that CrossFit does, I think one of the things that becomes a little bit hard is if you're an athlete, let's say, and it's similar to someone walking into a gym for the first time. I think this is why HYROX blew up so fast, is the barrier of entry to HYROX is pretty low. As far as from a competitive standpoint? It's mostly running. like really the crux of it that like that maybe would make someone think twice is like, am I strong enough to push the sled? Outside of that, like it might take you a long time, but you could chip away at everything. I think sometimes one of the things that like call it like a hybrid athletes, I think that's why like that's like a hot term right now is like it's mostly running with like some bodybuilding. And again, this is no knock on like a hybrid athlete.
For sure.
I do believe that like a CrossFitter is like the original hybrid athlete,
Okay.
but it's like you see someone, you know, post something and they're like, oh, I'm going to do like 30 muscle ups for time. And then I'm going to snatch this heavy weight and I'm going to like walk on my hands. And like, you look at it and you might say like, that's cool. And that's like inspirational, but it's a little less aspirational. Whereas like HYROX, you're like, all right, well, I could sign up with my friend. Like, I don't have to know how to snatch or clean and jerk or anything like that. So I think
a wall ball is not a hard movement.
Exactly. So I think that is one thing that you kind of have to be really like into CrossFit to really start to like kind of gobble that content up.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, at the same vein, I get told by a lot of people like, man, I love the CrossFit Games documentaries.
Right.
Like they're really awesome and they're compelling and they're cool. But I think that at times it feels a little scary and people can look at it and be like, that's a really cool thing. I can't do that.
For sure.
Like I'm never going to be able to, you know, walk on my hands. That's crazy.
It's like somebody watching somebody do like a YouTube video of a half marathon and deciding to go out and run that day versus being like, I'm going to go do Moab. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that's actually, I was talking to a friend before this podcast and one of the questions that she had is whether or not the rise of HYROX is because the gap of professionals and casuals, as far as like being able to do the movements and stuff like that, is so much more approachable versus CrossFit, where like you say, if you're watching the games, it's like, I might not be able to even accomplish any, like half of these movements.
I think that's a bit of it. I think one thing that HYROX does really, really well is they call it everyday people feel like they're like professionals. Like I did a HYROX in, I think February in Vegas, and it's like, you go into the like Red Bull tent and you're like, oh, this is a Red Bull tent. This is sick. And then they like have like the countdown and like you run out and it's like, you're on the course sometimes with some of the like top people in the world. And so I think they do a good job of making it just very inclusive and making people feel kind of like, for lack of a better term, special.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll see how it plays out. My kind of thought is eventually HYROX will end up pushing people into affiliates, because if you are like gung-ho on HYROX, there's a limited amount that you can do per year, right? And then you're going to have to probably travel. Like, let's say if you live here in Boise, you're like, all right, well, maybe there's one in Vegas or maybe Seattle, Portland, but like that's once a year. Otherwise, you're like, I'm going to go to Chicago. Mm-hmm. And because the stations are repetitive, like I suspect that you might do a few and then go like, okay, like, well, what's the next thing? And honestly, even if you were super into HYROX, what's the best way to train for HYROX? It's like, well, probably to run more and then like maybe dabble in some CrossFit.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you have to snatch heavy or clean and jerk or anything like that. But like most gyms that are most advantageous towards, call it functional fitness, or just kind of like, you know, increasing your fitness across different modalities, it's probably CrossFit.
For sure.
And so I think at some point you're going to start to see like that uptick in CrossFit gyms, whether it's HYROXers doing CrossFit classes, or, I mean, the gym we go to, CrossFit Casual here in Boise, like they have a HYROX class, you know, they have classes, I don't know about every day, but most days. And it's like exploded their membership base because you're able to now offer a lot more to members. But then again, like it lowers your barrier of entry to get people into the doors. Because I think for CrossFit, it's like, if you're new to it and you're interested in it, and you walk into a gym, the obstacles for a gym owner are, one, it's expensive, right? So like if I'm just your everyday gym goer and I'm paying, you know, an Axiom, I'm paying $30 a month, let's say, I'm walking into a CrossFit gym and it's like, hey, we're going to charge you 6 times that, 5 times that.
Yeah.
And then your first day is snatching and bar muscle ups. And you're like, well, I feel kind of alienated. I'm a little bit intimidated. But now if you have HYROX classes, like you can get people in the door, get them, you know, pushing the sled and running and doing wall balls. And then they're like, you know, I'm going to try a CrossFit class.
Right.
And they're like, okay, like it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And that's how I think you build like your membership base. And then you can introduce people to both modalities. But I think that like, in my mind, at least, it's like the thing I love about CrossFit is it is constantly varied.
Yeah. Whereas, do you think that HYROX will struggle with staying power at some point if every single competition stays the same and every workout stays the same?
I think at some point, maybe. I mean, the luxury that they do have is like they could wake up tomorrow and be like, hey, instead of wall balls, we're doing kettlebell swings.
For sure. It's not a hard thing to switch. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think we'll see. I think, like I said, the thing they do really well is just like getting people like essentially through the door
Yeah.
into events, doing them. I mean, they sell out super quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like, you know, ultimately it's like they did a good job with the live stream for, you know, the World Championships. But I think from a viewership perspective, just, you know, me going there, like sometimes it's hard to kind of like, you have to walk from thing to thing. It's not quite as good as, in my opinion, as like going to a CrossFit event.
Right.
But I truly see like application for both things. Like I wish that they would work together, and, you know, the first event at the CrossFit Games is like a mini HYROX. Like I think that would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things sometimes that CrossFit struggles with, of just kind of getting out of their own way of being like, yes, I do believe that the CrossFit athletes, some of the fittest athletes in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably the best way to train. I believe that.
Right.
But I've been in it for a long time, and I'm biased, right? So it's like understanding that, like, hey, you don't have to be at odds with HYROX,
Right.
right? Like I think that it would be very beneficial for both parties to work together.
Yeah.
And I wish they would. I hope they would.
Talk to me about what you think the rise of HYROX has done for athletes, as far as having another like player in the sport that's got a ton of viewership, a ton of traction. It's like, it's really blowing up. Does it give athletes, does it give them a new opportunity in the space, or does it become a bit conflicting for people who have like been CrossFit competitors for so long?
I think we've had a lot of athletes do HYROX races.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, like when you really break it down, the run is just so much more important than everything else.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, if you look at the people that do well in HYROX, they're runners that then become proficient at some of the movements.
Okay.
But like, I mean, if you figure like even the top CrossFit athletes in the world, like let me put it this way: if a CrossFit athlete, even if they were to just stop doing CrossFit and train specifically for HYROX for, let's call it 6 months,
yeah,
they might be able to be, you know, maybe top 15. I mean, you saw it with, you know, Tia's kind of jumped into HYROX,
mm-hmm.
but they're probably not going to be like that, the top of the top.
Okay.
If you invite the top 10 HYROX athletes to the CrossFit Games, they'll win. Let's say like the first workout of the games this year is I think it's a 2-mile run into a 2K row, and then a 4-mile run. I'm probably getting that wrong, but it's basically running and rowing.
Yeah.
They'll probably win that workout, and they'll probably take dead last in every single event,
because they're not going to be able to lift heavy and do.
It's like a boxer fighting an MMA
for
fighter,
sure. Yeah.
You know, and so I think that a lot of them have done it kind of for fun. It's like a good exposure piece for their brand. We've encouraged a lot of people to do it. Like, have a good time. You're really fit. Take advantage of that. You'll probably qualify for the World Championships just because like you guys are super fit.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's a cool kind of thing to show partners of like, hey, I'm kind of like dabbling in this new thing. I think in our experience with HYROX, we were a bit late to the game as far as like from the athlete side. I think we were kind of in a little bit of a wait and see mode.
Okay.
And I think the market, it was kind of like a bell curve. It exploded really quickly. And I think brands realized like, oh, this is like the thing right now.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them were just throwing money at people that the market was super inflated, just because I think brands were like, we just need to get into the game. Like we need to just sign somebody.
Yeah.
And then now I think it's like, okay, now people are starting to figure out like, okay, who are the like top people? What does that like kind of like return look like? You know, do we make the product that people want, you know, for HYROX, right? Like if you're not a running brand and you're a shoe company, like it's kind of tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that now it's starting to kind of calm down a bit. Like, don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of opportunity for some of those top athletes. But again, going back to like CrossFit did a great job early on of promoting and talking about like the Road to the Games documentaries, promoting those top athletes.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you know, some of the top athletes in HYROX, they may only have 10, 20, 30,000 followers. Whereas like,
so they're not star building like CrossFit did.
Yeah. And to be fair, it's still early on.
Right.
And I think that I wish CrossFit had continued to do that, because in my opinion, the way you grow your sport is you grow it by telling the stories of the athletes. And if you build the athletes' brands and you get them out to the world and they're signing partnership deals, money flows back into the ecosystem.
Correct.
Unfortunately, I think what CrossFit has done, and what I think a lot of like governing bodies do, call it, you know, the NCAA, like a lot of things like that, is they at times view the athletes as like, if they get too big, it detracts from what we're doing. And if they get this Nike deal, like, well, we want a Nike deal. So it's like, I think there's this like natural,
It's like a scarcity mindset a little bit about it.
yeah, reaction to kind of be like, okay, well, we'll get this Nike deal first, and then we'll like, you know, kind of disseminate some of that stuff to the athletes. And I just think that like no one is showing up to the CrossFit games because they're like, yes, don't get me wrong, like CrossFit as a training methodology is awesome, but no one's going like, oh, we want to go because it's like this CrossFit thing. It's like, no, people want to see like the top athletes that are doing CrossFit.
Right. It's what UFC did really well. Like you have, once they started doing their like UFC embedded documentaries and the countdowns and stuff like that, it goes from a 15-minute fight to, holy shit, I love Dustin Poirier. And have you seen how he is with his kid and his wife and blah, blah, blah. Like, and then you want that guy to win, even if you're a casual who's never watched a fight before.
Yeah. And like, again, that's when CrossFit was like growing, they did the Road to the Games, you know, series on YouTube. And like, I remember when I was early on, I was like, every time it came out, it was like literally like a countdown. Like, I'm going to watch this because they just did such a good job.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when they fired the media team, I think it was 2018, like it did, on one hand, I think it hurt the growth of the sport. I think it hurt the growth of CrossFit because I don't see those things as mutually exclusive.
Right.
But then they did create like a power vacuum, for lack of a better term, for people like Mars and Heber and like the Buttery Bros, you know, like to come in and kind of like fill that gap for people that still wanted the content. It just wasn't being made.
Right.
And then now all of a sudden it's like people are looking at the athletes and being like, well, you need to make the content. And it's like, well, I don't make,
I'm an athlete.
Yeah, I can make like shorts and stuff, but like that's not what I do best, you know? So yeah, it's a tricky spot. They're doing the Road to the Games again this year, which I'm excited about. I think that's cool. And I think a lot of now brands have kind of taken that, you know, Rad is building something similar with, you know, Danielle and Justin, and, you know, Gym Reapers was just filming with Justin today of like kind of telling that story. Like Rain has done some stuff. And I think that people want that content. And I don't believe that, you know, I think CrossFit looked at the games as being like, well, you're taking away from the affiliates. And I'm like, well, how many people step into an affiliate because they watch the CrossFit games and think it's cool? Like, that was me.
Yeah.
You know, so I just think that it's a misguided thing to think that the games takes away from affiliates.
Got you. What about for the athletes? Is it, I mean, you're in a position where you can see HYROX as like, I would imagine that from an agency perspective, it's like, this is another platform that we can kind of like usher our athletes into. It's another option if they, you know, like maybe they're a pretty good CrossFitter, but they can be a great HYROX athlete or whatever that is. Does having more players in that space, whether another HYROX kind of thing pops up or anything like that, does having more players in that competitive fitness space give more options for athletes to be able to like build that personal brand and start to gain the ability to just go full-time in their like athletic pursuit?
Yeah, totally. I think there's actually something called AthX.
Okay.
And it's right now it's just in the UK, but they want to come to the US and like, you know, more into broader Europe. And it's kind of a mix between CrossFit and HYROX.
Okay.
There's the stations change, but there's like a heavy lift. There's like some type of Metcon, and then more of like a kind of monostructural, call it like running, biking thing. And it's the look and feel is similar to HYROX, but I think that's something where you could see a CrossFitter step in and like win the thing because there's more involvement.
Yeah.
And then I guess part two to that would be like, I think that the more the better. I think it's, you know, again, it's a cliche, but rising tides raise all ships.
Yep.
I think that when you get more of those companies and brands involved, it just elevates it for everyone. And I would say that, you know, sometimes I don't want to say bleak, right? But like as bleak as it can look sometimes, like in CrossFit, especially like after the games last year, it's like we didn't know what was going to happen. And there was just so much uncertainty. One of the things we hang our hats on is like training, just call that broadly. Like it could be training for the CrossFit games. It could be like, I go play pickleball because I want to, you know, train for whatever, like,
right.
Or I'm just an average gym goer. Training's probably never been bigger. I mean,
for sure.
You think of like Adidas, as big of a company as they are, for the first time ever, they have like a training division of Adidas. And then like you're looking at like, okay, Nike tried to kind of do the whole like yoga, holistic kind of Viore vibe. And they're like, well, this is not working. Like we built our brand on like athletes first, winning competitions, like training. Like the Metcon is one of the most successful shoes that's ever been created by Nike.
Yeah.
And it's like, call it what you want, but like they built that shoe for CrossFit.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a good business move for them to label it CrossFit.
Right.
But like functional fitness, like it's called a Metcon.
Yeah.
You know? So like, I think that that's something that we're like, all right, well, how do we kind of in some ways reclassify some of our athletes of like, hey, they train for, call it the CrossFit Games. They're training for a HYROX. Like they're going to do a triathlon. Like I think you're seeing athletes do more, not necessarily do it professionally, but more to showcase like what they're capable of in comparison to like, okay, they might not be like the best in the field, but like, you know, James Sprague just did a half Ironman and he crushed it. Like Noah Olson did a half Ironman and he crushed it. I think actually Noah did a full Ironman and he crushed it. But it's like, yeah, he trained for it, but that's not what he does professionally. So for us, it's like, okay, these athletes are like the best in the world at like really like training for their thing. And just they're some of the fittest people on planet Earth. They just are.
Yeah.
And I think that's what like kind of is our North Star as far as like how we kind of navigate the ups and downs of the market. And also just being ruthlessly optimistic.
And so like maybe blurring those lines a little bit of like, instead of being a CrossFit thing or a HYROX thing or whatever, it's like, it's just about training in general.
Yeah. And I think it's like, okay, you know, call it whoever, right? If it's, you know, like Ellie Turner, right? Like she was a games athlete. She hurt her back a few years ago. She hasn't been able to train and compete the way she wants to, but like she just did I think it was like a triathlon sprint here in Boise. Yeah. She finished second. She's doing a half Ironman in like 3 weeks. She wants to get back to competing in CrossFit, but it's like we've been able to kind of like pivot that. And now all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, you're kind of going back to like the, you know, the barrier of entry of CrossFit and it being a little intimidating. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm Ellie Turner. I am super strong and I can speak to the CrossFit audience. I did a HYROX with Justin. So like you have some exposure from that.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to do a triathlon. I hurt my back. So I understand like rehab and recovery. I have a background in PT. And now I'm going to do a half Ironman. And so now all of a sudden, like if you're a brand, you know, like one of the partners she works with, Adapt Naturals, they're kind of like a supplement company. They have like collagen and, you know, omega-3s and kind of more of like, I would say like holistic kind of like wellness.
Right.
She's able to kind of like speak to like the hardcore CrossFitter, but also like have a little bit more of like a softer touch to being like, oh, you're a postpartum mom that like is dealing with pelvic floor issues. Like, I kind of can help work you through that. Like it's, you know,
sure.
I've hurt my back. I understand that. I can kind of speak a little more softly to that because I think if it's just CrossFit all the time, it becomes a little tougher unless you're like the best CrossFitter in the world to really appeal to a broader audience.
Yeah.
And so I think it's being able to be a little bit more like multifaceted in your approach is helpful just across the board, even just with like partnerships.
Right. There was one of the things where you said, so like on your guys' website, I do like a ton of research before these things. It says that you guys build platforms for people with something to say. I really like that because I think that it doesn't talk about like we build platforms for people who are gonna go and win the CrossFit Games. There's so much like vulnerability and so much authenticity that comes into like, I busted my back up. People know me for my brand being that I'm like one of the most competitive athletes in the world. And now I have to switch a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of people who like the first reaction in that moment is, hey, I want to go create a bunch of content while I'm feeling really low about this and like be open and vulnerable about it. How do you encourage people to like figure out what that piece of authenticity is and like actually like encourage them to be vulnerable too? Because I feel like that's another thing. It's not just difficult logistically to create content, but sometimes it's like, yeah, dude, I just lost, like I didn't perform as well in the games that I've been training for an entire year, or I just like broke my back. I did whatever. Yeah. So how do you encourage that piece where you can get people to be vulnerable and authentic in times that like helps them create that brand?
I mean, it's definitely challenging. I mean, like I think for Ellie, it's been like a lot of up and down, and it's not just, it wasn't one of those things where I think at least for her, she wasn't looking at it as like, oh, I hurt my back. Like here's like an opportunity. I think it kind of like some of that presented itself. And don't get me wrong. Like, I think like, you know, if it were up to her, she'd be healthy and competing at the CrossFit Games. Right.
And you have to be adaptable at that point too. It's like, yeah, of course you didn't want to hurt your back and do it, but like, here's the situation you're in.
Yeah. And I mean, like, even if you look at, you know, one of Justin's most watched YouTube videos is post Games 2023, when, you know, he finished outside the top 10. And I think, you know, this sport is so young and some of the champions, you just win and keep winning until it's like you don't feel like winning anymore. And like, that's just not sports and not reality.
Yeah.
And so they made a YouTube video of him just being kind of vulnerable, talking about, what happened and like kind of what's been going through his mind and whatnot. And I also think that like a piece of us putting that out there is we've seen the success of people just like building their brand off of just kind of speaking their truth and like what's on their mind. I mean, Danielle Brandon's a perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong. Like, I think I wouldn't necessarily take that blueprint and apply it to everyone.
Yeah.
I think she kind of has that like rugged kind of edge to her that people like. And I don't think it's not something that you can fake.
You can't,
right?
You can't fake being authentic. It's like,
yeah. Well, and even just like, you can't fake the like kind of like ruggedness of just like, I'm just going to say this thing, like, during the games, the COVID year, it's like she crosses the finish line and like flips off the crowd and everyone loves it.
Yeah.
Right. Like everyone's like, oh, like that was like a huge signature moment for her.
Yeah.
But it was just like her being real. And that's just like how she is. Whereas like, I couldn't be like, hey, Ellie, like when you cross the finish line, like do this thing. It's like, well, that's just, people are gonna be like, what the hell is she doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just understanding, like, I think authentic can look a lot of different ways. It can be vulnerable. It could be just like being yourself and being kind of like, I'm just going to say what's on my mind and like, I don't give a shit, And I think that that's kind of in the eyes of the beholder, and it's different for every person, depending on like just how they are as a person and what their personality is like.
Yeah. Do you have to help athletes ever get over the feeling of like, well, I don't know if I should post this because I don't know if it's cringe, or I don't know if people are going to judge me, or I don't blah, blah, blah. Is that ever a conversation you have to have with people, is like helping them get over that hump of like, just post the thing?
Yeah, a bit. I think again, it's dependent on the person.
Right.
I think like if you look at Jason and Dallin, it's like if you go look at one of their last posts of them doing like a GoWad together, and then it's like GoWad score 69, and it's like a hilarious thing, but like it works for them because they've like built up, like people don't look at that and be like, because as like for them that's authentic because they're funny, they like to give each other shit, they make these funny videos, and it's kind of like people have learned to expect that.
Right.
But if someone just randomly posts that, it's like it goes from being like authentic to inauthentic real quick
because they're trying to bite off of somebody else's style. Like, oh, it works for them, so I'm going to try
exactly.
it. Yeah.
And so I think that's where it goes back to my point of it being individualistic of like, I remember, I don't think Justin, he didn't end up posting it, but it was back in like 2021 going into the games, and he like clipped something of someone asking him if he was going to win the games. And he like put this like voiceover of like an old like Rex Ryan video of him talking about like how like basically he's going to go like fuck everybody up. And it was like kind of in jest, but like I think at that time, like that was his mindset.
Yeah.
But he also is just like aware of like, that's not necessarily, even though that's I think it was his mindset at the time, that's not how people perceived him. He was very like golden retriever, kind of happy-go-lucky. And so as much as like in some ways that might have been what he was like really feeling, if you're like kind of feeling yourself.
Yeah.
If it's not like the persona that like you give all the time, then like it may not be the time or the place.
For sure.
So I think that he ended up kind of, I guess, more like erring on the side of like caution, I guess, a little bit in that respect. But
Right.
I do think that like, again, even if that's what he believed, every interview, everything that he's ever done doesn't have that vibe to it. And so I think sometimes it's like you do have to be a little bit smart, a little bit like, I don't want to say political because I do want people to say what's on their mind.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like certainly it's just like, sometimes I'm just like, hey, like don't overthink this.
Yeah.
Like if you think it's funny, post it, like whatever, as long as it's not like, like super offensive. And like sometimes you have to like put your hat on and be like, yeah, if I was like, a partner, I might not love this or something. But like for the most part, it's like, yeah, if you think it's funny or you think it's cool or you think it's awesome, like just do it.
Right. I think that thing that you're talking about with Justin is like, I could see that being very freeing in some ways, but also if you do it incorrectly, I could see it being very limiting, because if you start from the beginning, just being yourself all the time, like highs, lows, whatever, and just posting exactly what's on your mind, I could see that creating like the persona that you've created online is exactly who you are. And so regardless of, what you're feeling, high, low, sideways, whatever, it fits, and it like fits into the brand that you do. But if you're somebody who like finds this character or something like that to play that people attach to, but now all the time you have to like play into this character and you can never share how you actually feel. And like, you have to continue going like back to that gold mine. I could see that becoming a very difficult game to play if you're like, essentially create that box for yourself where it's like, hey, the only thing that my audience relates to is a person who's not actually me.
Yeah. And I think he's like evolved like him in particular has evolved a lot because I think like truthfully, he wasn't ready for the success that happened to him. Like he just wanted to,
and I'm not saying he fucked this up. I'm just saying like,
no, totally. He wanted to just make it to the CrossFit Games.
Right.
And then I think like early on, he just like looked for things to fuel him. Like he would, like him and Jason have kind of come full circle, but early on it was like, Justin didn't like Jason in large part because Dave Castro kind of propped Jason up and Justin was like, all right, like he used that as fuel a little bit. And I remember like early on, I mean, I've known Justin a long time, but like thinking like, okay, like his genuine personality is very like happy-go-lucky. He's just like a nice, happy guy. Like, but he does have that like competitive side that like reminds me of like, you know, and again, this is not comparing him to Michael Jordan, but it's like watching The Last Dance and like how you create those, maybe not enemies, but just like you create these narratives in your head to like when training gets real dark, you're like, all right, I'm doing this so I can achieve X or beat so-and-so. Right. And so I think there's a piece of that every athlete has, but his personality truly is not the one that's like, you know, like the CrossFit Games was there for the road to the games. And they're like, they wanted him basically to be like, I'm Justin and I'm going to win the CrossFit Games. And he's just kind of like, his whole thing is like, well, I'm Justin and I'm capable of winning the CrossFit Games. And he has like those like mantras up on his wall of like, hey, like my best is enough. Like he's talented enough to where if he gives his best, he's capable of winning.
Right.
I think that's like, it's twofold. It's that, but also like if I give my best, I'm okay with the result. And then, you know, it's like he has confidence comes through preparation. And I think for him, it's just like, hey, if I'm prepared and I'm giving my best, like I'm going to be really tough to beat.
Right.
And I think like that's kind of like it's not necessarily what he wants people to see because that would imply that it's fake. It's like, that's really how he views things. Like he's finished competitions or like workouts and just been like, I couldn't have gone 1 second faster.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that result, which is like a pretty hard spot to get to if you're really competitive.
For sure.
But I think that's why, like, you know, when CrossFit's like, hey, like say this thing, like he's kind of just like, well, that's your narrative.
Right.
And I get the storyline, but that's not like my narrative that I'm telling myself in my head. And so I don't want to like say this thing when I'm like, yeah, I want to win. I think I can win.
Yeah.
But like to just, you know, say like, I'm going to win this year. It creates this like dramatization thing, which again, like if you're a movie maker, like you want that,
right?
You want that like sound clip. Right. But I think that's not necessarily like what drives him or like, you know, that's just not really who he is. And
I think too, it's got to be, I admire the heck out of him for being willing to be like, yeah, no, that's not me. I'll deliver this line how I want to. Yeah. I admire that so much because, to your point of like longevity and like the career that you want to have over long term, like, yeah, that might work between now and when the games are over and this like documentary is done being filmed and they cut it all together. But over the next, you know, rest of the career, it's like, yeah, okay, so what, for a couple months you played this like, I'm in this dark seas and I'm in my Rocky cutscene and this and that.
Yeah.
And then you just come out of it because it wasn't your narrative. Like, I think that those are the kinds of things where when you've got CrossFit coming to you and being like, hey, we want you to deliver this line, I would imagine that it's in those moments where it's like really important, but also like really respectable to stay true to yourself because you've got the top of the industry and people who are like coming to you saying like, hey, we want you to be somebody who like, we want you to be, not who you want you, like who you actually are.
And he's gotten really good at that. I mean, just
it's really cool.
Like he's evolved a lot and I think he's just very comfortable in his own skin. And I think that, you know, truthfully him having some kind of downtimes as far as like not winning and like going through a lot is it's ultimately like a good thing. Because I think he wants to prove in a way that like he can win the CrossFit Games, but also have like some semblance of balance. Yeah. And I think like early on, like Matt Fraser was like kind of his role model. And, you know, I think that it was like, you know, Matt famously, it's like, I don't use knives like leading up to the games and because I don't want to cut my finger. And he just obsessed about everything. And you kind of have to have that like somewhat base level of obsession to be as good as he was and like to win.
Right.
But I think for Justin, it's like he reached this point after winning twice where it was like, okay, I don't want like necessarily that life. And that's no knock on, you know, Matt, like it worked for him and he dominated, but it's like, I want to be able to just like do things with my friends. And like, I don't want to like, yeah, don't get me wrong. Like at this time of the year, the games are, a month away. Like that dude's dialed.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I mean, he went to the Post Malone concert last week and he had a great time and like he went to bed a little late, but it's like, hey, like you're going to look back and you're not going to regret like doing that like one thing.
Right.
And so I think like it's just, again, going back to that authentic piece, it's just like that's authentically him. Like the quotes on the wall aren't bullshit. Like they're there for a reason. Like it's literally like physically on the wall.
Yeah.
And I admire that because it's easy to kind of fall into the trap of like being maybe like pretending to be like who you're not because that's what you think you need to do or what people want to see from you.
Yeah. And at that point, I feel like you're letting your career get bigger than you. Like you start becoming something that you're not because you think that you have to play ball. But it's really cool. I think it's really cool and like inspiring to see somebody who doesn't let the thing that they do get bigger than who they are as a person, And I think that long term, so many people connect to that because you can feel it when somebody's actually being themselves.
Yeah. And I think it's just like, he's aware of the fact that CrossFit is really giving him everything. I mean, we've talked before, like where there's a big group of us and it's like that realization of like, without CrossFit, like none of us would be together.
Interesting.
It's like his coaches, like Ellie, like myself, like, he knew Dallas before then, but they wouldn't be working together. And so it's like that gratitude of just, I think sometimes, in the CrossFit community, people can be like, oh, well, these like athletes, like they just train, they don't go to an affiliate. They don't really care about the community. They just kind of care about like the games. And I just think like, yeah, like maybe that's true for some, but I think in large part, it's like people like, yeah, like they're just taking it to like, the next level of like what CrossFit is capable of, but that doesn't detract from the fact that they still love the sport, they love the community. Like most people get into it because they're like it's community first, that then kind of they fall into the sports side. It's pretty rare for people to just kind of skip the whole like community open and barbecue stuff to just be like the top athlete.
Yeah.
So I just right now it's just like an unfortunate thing of like the space is as great as the community is and like what sets it apart is also sometimes what it like can kind of pull it apart. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, there's a lot of just like toxicity out there with, different talk shows and podcasts and things. And it's just like, hey, like he's not trying to screw CrossFit, he believes in this just as much as you guys. It's just, he has a different way of showing it.
Right.
So,
before we get out of here, what are some of the things after being as close as you have to some of the biggest athletes in the space, all of the biggest brands in the space? What are some of the things that you want to see if you had like a magic wand to be like, here's what I want to see like the competitive fitness industry turn into? What are the things that you want to see come together from an athlete's and a brand side as like you said, functional fitness just continues to grow and training gets bigger and bigger?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess speaking more specifically to like the CrossFit side, because that's kind of like our bread and butter. Like, again, don't get me wrong. Like we see training as a big piece of things, but it feels like it's just like the athletes are moving in one direction and like brands are trying to like kind of figure out like, is it, do I partner with an athlete or with CrossFit? And CrossFit's kind of like, I don't want to say they lost their way, but it's just like, there's not like a cohesive kind of like thing across, I would call it CrossFit, like brands and athletes. And I think when things were really going really well, it was like CrossFit was helping the athletes like build their brand, which meant that more brands were spending with athletes, but then they also like were spending with CrossFit because they saw what either CrossFit was doing for their brand or the athlete was doing with their brand. So whether it was, brand pays CrossFit and then brand by kind of proxy pays athlete or the other way around, it was like this kind of symbiotic relationship where like everyone was kind of winning.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways, like it kind of fell into everyone's lap a bit early on. It was just like, I almost felt like they could do no wrong.
Yeah.
And I wish it would get back to the point where, if everyone were to just kind of work together and just do what they say they're going to do, we'd be in a way better spot because whether it's an athlete not delivering and them being like, oh, wait, we dabbled in this CrossFit thing and like, that's not for us. Or if it's, a brand pays CrossFit to be a sponsor and maybe they sponsor a few athletes and then CrossFit under delivers massively. Well, then they're kind of like, all right, we're going to spend our budget elsewhere.
Right.
And so I think it's just like getting back to storytelling, working together, just doing what the hell you say you're going to do. Like if you sign a deal, do like the bare minimum is what you sign. Right. And like we tell our athletes that all the time. It's like, let's just over deliver. It's not that hard to just go a little bit above and beyond. Like, make yourself unkillable. And that goes for athletes. It goes for CrossFit. It's like, if you just do what you say you're going to do and be a good partner, you can't control like budgetary issues and like the market, but you can control like your effort. And you don't want to be in a position where someone's, you know, a brand or whoever is sitting around a table and being like, well, this person doesn't care, or this person underdelivered. And so I just wish that if right now it feels like CrossFit's kind of like maybe not at odds with the athletes, but athletes feel a certain type of way about CrossFit, and CrossFit, you know, over the past few years hasn't done a great job of like storytelling the athletes. And so it's just, everyone's kind of at this like at odds with each other. And I think that like the stuff that worked didn't stop working. They just stopped doing it. You know, like people still want the content. There's still a lot of value in this space. I mean, like the thing that we tell brands a lot is like, okay, you can partner with like an NFL player and, you know, people watch them on Sundays and drink beer and whatever. But like, if you make a cleat for an athlete, like you're selling that cleat to high school kids and junior high kids. Whereas like CrossFit, it's like my mom is in her 50s and she does CrossFit, and it's like, oh, I need to buy some grips. Which grips should I buy? Like, oh, I saw so-and-so athlete talking about this one. That seems like a good, you know, grip to buy. Or, oh, these shoes look cool. And like the athlete that I follow, you know, so it's like your demographics, like 8 to 80.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that that's one thing that like, if everyone just worked together, like we'd be in such a better spot. And like, I truly believe that we can get back to like where that space was. It just, and I don't even think it takes a lot of effort. It just takes some cooperation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would imagine that it takes a lot of people like you too who just want to see everybody win. Like you want to see CrossFit corporate win. You want to see the athletes win. You want to like have a good culture.
Yeah, I mean, like the games and the affiliates and like CrossFit doing well is like best case, you know. And I think like we would love to see that, you know. But at the same time, it's like I also can't just like wait for that to happen. It's like we kind of have to take some things into our own hands a bit and diversify. And like, you know, you've seen kind of the rise of other competitions and World Fitness Project, which again is a whole nother podcast, but it's like more opportunity is better. Yeah. And again, like sometimes so much opportunity can be a little bit paralyzing because it's tough to do it all. But for us, it's just like, we kind of look at like, what are our allegiance at the end of the day is to our people. Mm-hmm. And we would love for CrossFit and whoever to kind of like be along with that ride. And I think it's best case. But I also just can't like hope that something's going to happen and just kind of like wait. We have to take action, and we're not just going to sit on our hands. Right.
Yeah, that's cool. You mentioned a little bit earlier that you guys are getting into like women's flag football. What are some of the other things that, whether it's like full on sports or, you know, trends like run clubs or anything like that, what are some of the other things that you have your eye on as some of the like upcoming sports or upcoming trends that are happening in the fitness industry right now that either athletes or brands should be paying attention to as like kind of the next thing that's going to be popping off?
Yeah, I think AthX is going to be a cool thing as that like kind of grows and expands into the US and into Europe, more into Europe. For me personally, I think flag is an interest because it's like, I miss football, I love football, and it kind of blends that like niche sport, mm-hmm. being flag with like a traditional kind of mainstream sport in just football.
Yep.
And there are a lot of brands like coming into the space. And so for us, like we were in LA last week and we left being like, all right, we're going to double down on this. And it might take a while. And, you know, we've talked to companies that are like, I'll have more budget in 2027, a year out for the Olympics. Right. Mm-hmm. And we get that that's like, it's going to take some time. I just think that we've found that like the traditional sports world is just like not necessarily for us. It doesn't rule it out for forever, but it just is so transactional and it's just so monopolized that it's just like, it's hard to get into, and it's just not the way that we do business or have built the business.
Yeah.
I don't really have any interest in just like being told yes by a big athlete and him telling yes to everyone and us just being kind of like one of many that, you know, we could potentially get kind of burned, or, you know, we leverage a relationship and we end up kind of like souring that relationship because like at the end of the day, it's like the athlete makes the ultimate decision, but it's also important for us to have like at least some role in like guiding and like, you know, I think giving athletes all the information to allow them to make an educated decision is like really like, that's our job. But it's also like, if someone's just going to completely go the opposite direction and we don't even really, you know, don't have a relationship with that athlete. We don't really know them. And we're making a promise to a brand that like we're 50-50 on if it's going to be kept is just like not a recipe for success.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like, working with, we'd be open to working with other sports and athletes in like some of those kind of like niche spots that I think that there's opportunity. But for now, I think it's growing the marketing side of the agency, continuing to do what we're doing in CrossFit. And then I think flag football is a big piece of things.
Okay.
But it's like, we're open and like we're open to any conversation, exploring any opportunity. Like we're never just going to say no to something. It's like we want to vet it and check it out.
Right. So just finding niche sports where you can like actually make a difference in the athletes' lives instead of just be like pushing papers from one desk to another. Essentially,
yeah. I mean, I think it's those, we've kind of built our agency on kind of jumping in the trenches with people and helping them kind of do their thing. And if we can help whatever entity and introduce them to people as well, like with some of our like connections and Rolodex of brands, like that's what we're going to do. And I think that's what we're hoping to do with Flag. And I just think that it's a little bit more rewarding when you are able to kind of like work with someone for the long term and have that personal relationship. And like I mentioned, like we didn't have to have Izzy out here. Like it probably didn't really matter in the grand scheme of like us working with her, but it's important for her to be like, oh, like I get that. Like I've spent time with you guys. Like, if I'm like, hey, sorry, I was a little late texting you back. Like Macy didn't sleep last night. She's like, oh, like how is Macy? Those things are important. Like they just are. And that's something that like, we're not going to compromise on.
Right. It's got to be so rewarding too, to have a relationship with somebody like that and like grow with them in their career and know at the beginning, like, dude, I would love to get a no-bull deal.
Yeah.
And then it happens for him and you get that call and you get to celebrate and do all that stuff at the same time. That's got to be so much more rewarding than working with somebody who's already made it. And then everything is just kind of like a bland, like, okay, I guess I have to take another video. I have to post another story.
I mean, when we first started working with Jason Hopper, it's like all he wanted to be all his life was a Nike athlete. And, he's a football player. And like being able to be like, hey, we got you a Nike deal. Like that was cool. Like I'm next weekend, I'm going to Philly with Izzy to a Red Bull event. And like, she's a huge fan of Red Bull. And it's like, that isn't done yet, but we're like working towards it. And it's like, I feel pretty good about that and confident in it. And like the day that I'll be able to like call her and be like, hey, you're a Red Bull athlete. Like that's pretty sick.
Yeah.
And like being able to like, it means something beyond just like, I'm getting a paycheck, right? It's like those are important like things and important milestones. And it's just, that's, I think, what we kind of like live for, honestly.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, dude, I think your story is super inspiring to me because it's really cool to hear that that you were able to just like take the thing that you figured out that you wanted to do and sacrifice anything for it. It's like, we're moving to Miami. I'm going to get paid nothing. I'm going to like sit on the floor. I'm going to get coffees. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then the fact that you like did the thing, like you made it, and then you're like still the way that you talk about stuff isn't like, oh, we're going to have offices in Miami and New York and LA and we're going to like this. Like none of the things that you talk about are about you. It's all about like, what did we do for this athlete? What deals did we get them? How did we like cover it when they had all these big moments in their career? And I think that that's a very inspiring thing for people who have something that they care that deeply about, to hear that other people like you like made all those sacrifices and then came out on top and was able to like keep a healthy relationship with it. So I think it's super cool, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, like, I definitely don't feel like it's like we're on top. It's like we're on our way, But it does feel good that it's just like, yeah, you make those sacrifices and there's no guarantee that it works. And like, I mean, part of me too is I'm like, oh, I'm making sacrifices. I'm like, I moved to Miami. Like at worst, like it just didn't work out and I like moved back home, So it's not like life or death, but it's just, I think it's one of those things where it's like, hey, like if you want something, you're probably going to have to like, maybe not even call it sacrifice. You're just gonna have to like compromise on like, what that looks like and really be honest with yourself and say like, all right, like, what are you willing to kind of give up for that? And like, we moved across the country away from our family and stuff, but it didn't really feel like a sacrifice necessarily because it's like, well, this is it. This is what I want to do. Like there's not really a decision. Like,
right.
It's just, so yeah, I just think I don't ever want to be like, make it seem like bigger than it is. Or like, I think it's one thing for us. It's like, I don't want us to become like bigger than the people that we work for. Like we're kind of, the job is to be like behind the scenes. And if we can kind of get out there and like tell people a little bit about like our story or like our clients and help them kind of grow, it's like everybody wins.
Right.
So
absolutely. Heck yeah, man. Well, for people who want to find you, like follow the stuff that you're doing, traveling to like all over the world to all these events and stuff like that, or catch up with the lab, where are the places they can find you?
I'm on Instagram. I think drobbins95. Lab is on Instagram. Our website is lab-mgmt.com. Yeah, that's really it.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I can't wait to see all the stuff that you're up to in the next couple months. Obviously, we've got a couple big ones with the games and stuff like that coming up. But yeah, super appreciate you taking the time to come on here and inspire people with the fact that you just went all out and did the dang thing. I think it's super cool, dude.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Be where your feet are. Peace.